What is up, Internet basketball junkies? Today we're sitting down with legendary Ohio high school basketball coach Randy Montgomery, a 600 plus game winner who built powerhouse basketball programs at Triway, Hoover, West Branch. From Final Four runs to AP state championships to packed gymnasiums, youth pipelines, community wide program building, Randy helped shape basketball culture in Northeast Ohio for decades. Tonight, we explore Coach Montgomery's relationship with John Wooden, Bob Huggins. We explore the rise of the pit at Triway. We talk about some old school coaching culture, program building philosophy, and the basketball concepts that defined his teams, including motion offense, the slice series, a 1-1-3 zone, a 1-3-1 trapping defense, and much, much more. Coach Montgomery, thanks so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
So, Coach, let's start with this. How does a high school basketball coach from Ohio end up sitting in John Wooden's den in California and talking basketball?
Well, when I was coaching at Triway, which is in Worcester, that's very near the hometown of Dean Chance, who was a pitcher for the California Angels back in the '60s during Wooden's run at UCLA. And Dean was an outstanding pitcher, won the Cy Young, and he was good friends with Coach Wooden. And Dean and I became good friends when I was at Triway. And we were just talking about, just like tonight, he was talking about Coach Huggins, and I was talking about, how I knew him. And he said, he asked me who my favorite coach was, and I said, probably John Wooden. And he said, I know Coach Wooden really well, and he used to come to watch baseball. He loved baseball when he was in UCLA. And he said, if you ever want to go out and meet him, I'll take you out. So he did that. He took us out, my wife and I, and we spent a week on our initial visit. And obviously it was a trip of a lifetime. Just had a great time. And he loved Dean as a pitcher, and Dean was a great basketball player as well. So they both connected as well as we did. And we spent probably 4 or 5 hours the first time we were there, and got his phone number and went back each summer after that for the next, I think, 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, I'm sure Coach Wooden has a lot of people that would want to visit him. Were you shocked at just how generous he was with his time?
Yeah, after I did a lot of studying afterwards and read a lot of his books, and he was very gracious. And one of his key mottos in life is make each day your masterpiece. And he lived that. He really did, because each time we were there, again, we were just a high school coach from Ohio and his wife, and he knew that it meant a lot to us. And I think he enjoyed the visits, but I think he was, each day he made it a masterpiece. No matter what we did, we went out to eat with him. He got phone calls from Bill Walton while we were there. He treated everybody with incredible respect, and was always generous and gracious with the time. And we just became good friends. He's a very good person, and a very unique philosophy toward basketball, which I think he also lives in life.
So you got to spend a lot of time with Coach Wooden. Where did these conversations typically go? Is this non-basketball related? Is it life lessons? Is it storytelling? Is it X and O's, leadership? What kind of stuff were you talking about?
Well, we were there, I think 9 or 10 times. So, and they were long visits, 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours at a time. Sometimes we went out to eat. And so I, as we kept going back out there, I kept thinking of things that I wanted to discuss with him. And, some certainly he would talk basketball if you wanted to. We discussed his philosophy. His defensive philosophy, he told me, was 3 men playing man and 2 men playing zone. which I that took me aback when I heard that. And he said the three men closest to the ball are playing man to man, and the other two go zone, which is, I guess, a form of shell drill.
Yeah.
But I'd never heard it, described quite like that. So, well, we talked about everything. His wife, who he was incredibly devoted to, had many stories about her, and just some incredible stories of. When I first met him, I said, I'm just a high school coach from Ohio. And he said, oh, don't say that. He said, I was a high school coach for 12 years. And I was teaching English when I got drafted in World War II. And he and the football coach went off to war. And when they came back, they hired Coach Wooden back, but they did not hire the football coach back. And he said, if you don't hire him back, I'm not coming back. So they said, well, we're not hiring him back. So that's how Coach Wooden got into college coaching. He left that high school job, took a job in college, and then worked from Indiana State, went from there to another job. And really, when he applied it, he had two jobs that he was after. One was Minnesota and one was UCLA. And he interviewed at both places, he told me, and said that he really wanted to stay in the Big Ten and the Midwest and was hoping for Minnesota. And they told him that they would call him after the interview at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. And he had interviewed at UCLA, and they called and said, we'd like to offer you the job. And he said, well, I'll let you know after 6 o'clock on Sunday night. So they called. They didn't call it at 6. I'm sorry. They said that they would call. Minnesota would call at 6 o'clock. So he was sitting there waiting for Minnesota to call and give him the answer, and he got no call. 6:15. He said no call. 6:30. No call. 6:45. He got a call from UCLA, and they said, Coach, what do you think? And he said, well, I'll take the job. And he said about 10 minutes later, Minnesota called him and said, Coach, sorry, our phone lines were out. We had a snowstorm up here, and we've been trying to get a hold of you for the last 45 minutes, and we want to offer you the job. And he said, well, I'm sorry. I already committed to UCLA. And I don't want to go back on my word. So even though he wanted the Minnesota job, he went to UCLA and really didn't enjoy it. His first year, he was going to leave after the first year and come back to Purdue, where he had played. And he went in to tell the AD at UCLA, and J.D. Morgan was the AD, and he told him, well, you can go, John, but I want you to remember it was you that insisted on a 3-year contract. And he said, yeah, I did. He said, well, it's up to you. So he said, well, I'll honor the 3 years. So he stayed for 2 more years, and the rest is history. He stayed out there, got comfortable, but a man of integrity, just a great person, very intelligent. Just had a unique approach to basketball for sure. Never mentioned winning ever. Told me, said you could ask any of my players and they would tell you that I never ever mentioned the word winning. I always mentioned do your best. So,
well, what a twist!
I asked him what was it?
What a twist of fate that would have been if he'd ended up at Minnesota and not at UCLA. Do you think your meetings with Coach Wooden reinforced the things that you already believed in coaching, or do you think they changed what you believe?
Well, they reinforced for sure, because it was a time in my career. This would have been 1996 to 2005 for the 9 years there that we were out to see him. So he was 87 years old, when we first met him, in great shape. In our last meeting, he was 95 and in pretty decent shape for 95. We went out to eat with him that day, and but he's just unable to continue doing those things. His daughter was very protective of him, and just felt that at 95 he was living alone. You know, he had people all the time checking on him, but he still lived in the same condominium where he lived with his wife. And so, yeah, it did. It reinforced how I felt, just how to treat people, and how important integrity is, and to stay the course. He said UCLA was not a great job when he took it. He said they didn't have a home gymnasium. He said we played home games in 8 different venues over the first 2 years. And he said we practiced in the YMCA that was dirty, and people would be practicing pole vaulting over across the way. And they had promised them that they were going to build Pauley Pavilion. But, that was in 1948, and they never did build Pauley until 1960. 7, I think, 64, 65, and about that time.
Yeah, I would imagine that, you as a coach who is achieving at a high level in your own right, you go and you're sitting down with Coach Wooden, who's achieved at the highest level of basketball, and it's still a humble person that's willing to make friends with people and share information. I'm sure that had to change some of how you view success in a big picture sense, some of how you view legacy in a big picture sense. But, in this picture that we're looking at, I see your wife, Becky. How important is it to have a wife and a family that's supportive at this kind of level, where they're willing to travel out with you to California to visit Coach Wooden? How important is it to have a wife and family that supports coaching? We both know how demanding coaching can be. Talk a little bit about just your wife and your family and their support through the years of your coaching endeavors.
Well, that's true, Matt. And I've always said the 2 most important things in your life should be your faith and who you marry, your mate. Both will completely guide your life in a direction that, is important. So, Becky and Coach Wooden actually connected very well, because he saw her devotion to what I was doing, and he connected, I think, Becky's dedication to me and to our support and love of basketball to his wife. And it just you can't say enough about how important it is to have someone. I would have never been able to do all of the things that I did without the support of her. As a matter of fact, when Dean said, I'll take you out to see Coach Wooden. That was in, like the winter time. And he finally did call me in July and said, no, he called, I think, in April, and said, I'm going in July. And he talked to Becky, and he said, tell Randy I'm going to California. If he wants to go with me to meet Coach Wooden, I'll take him. So I was away, I think, at basketball camp or something. I came home, and she said, Dean called and said he's going to California in July and wants to know if you want to go meet Coach Wooden. And I said, well, boy, I don't know. I've been gone doing camps and all the things we do as a head coach. And I said, it's going to cost money. I said, I don't know. I don't think I should go. And she says, you're going and I'm going. So she had already made the plans. She got the plane tickets off our points on our credit card. And there you go. I would have never gone probably if it hadn't been for her. And she's just a tremendous support as we all need in the coaching profession. And Coach Wooden was absolutely devoted, to his wife. Matter of fact, they named the court at Pauley Pavilion after him, and they asked him about it, and he said, only if you put my wife's name on there as well. So I don't know if you ever noticed that, but the the court at John Wood and Poly Pavilion has his and his wife's name on there, and he wouldn't have allowed him to do it without that. So, very important.
I never noticed that. And you coached over 700 games. I'm sure you took Becky scouting with you some. She probably put in 1,000 games with you to support your career. But when I think about your career, we've got 600 plus wins. We've got AP state championships, conference titles, Final Four runs. But I think a lot of your success has nothing to do with the actual 32 minutes of court time. It was the environments and the youth programs and the promotion and the culture and the community buy-in that you created through program building. So before we even get into the actual Triway or Hoover basketball, I think it's important for the audience to understand how you built these programs that so many players and people wanted to belong to. And I think that your 600 wins, I think that starts long before the tip-off of any of these games. And you did such a great job of making basketball an unavoidable thing in the communities that you coached in. And the first, kind of theme that I wanted to touch on here is your ideas around branding your teams around the town and communities that you were coaching in. Can you talk a little bit about some of the branding efforts that you made to get your programs going?
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s, Matt, and then began my coaching career, in the very early 80s. And at that point in time, in high school basketball in Ohio, the Barberton Magics were the team. And that Jack Reynolds had a tremendous program going at Barberton. He had Carter Scott and the Bodner twins, and they had maybe one of the greatest high school teams, public school teams, certainly in Ohio history. They won a state championship, and I think they won 88 games in a row or something like that, 77 in a row. But anyway, that was the program that I mimicked. And, just when I played against Barberton when I was in high school at their gym, and it was completely packed, and the pageantry that was going on and everything happening, as well as my own high school, Salem, where, Friday night was an event. You had everybody in town was there. We had a gym that held 2,200 people, and we had 1,200 season tickets. And I ended up actually building on to Salem, putting the upper deck on during my junior year to 4,200 seats. So, it was a big thing in high school. And part of that was, having the band play. When I took the job at Triway, they really hadn't had a lot of success. So I talked to them about things that were really important. If they didn't want to do that, then I really wasn't interested in the job. And one was, we wanted to have the pep band at every game. We went out and made bumper stickers immediately. Titan Fever, catch it, it lasts forever. And we put them out there for the community to get.
One
of the most things I know you did it.
Yeah. One of the most interesting things that I thought that you did at Triway is you created this purple store, and you wanted to get the color purple out in the community. Talk a little bit about your thoughts behind trying to brand the community with your school colors.
Well, Triway was a suburb, so to speak, of Worcester. So Worcester High School got all the attention, so to speak. And we were kind of all of the schools on the outskirts. The sporting goods store in town, had a few shirts, but most of it was all Worcester General. So we felt like we wanted to get our brand out there, and so we took some money, I think $1,000, and we bought things, and we set up a purple store. Again, my wife and our neighbor set up what was called the Purple Store in the cafeteria of the gym. So people would buy things there. We bought $1,000 worth of stuff and put all the money right back in, and kept buying new things. And I think by the fourth, fifth year, we had, we had all kinds of stuff. We had a golf club head covers with Triway Titans. We had golf balls that said Triway Titans. We had hoodies. We had T-shirts. We had socks. We had scrunchies for little girls to wear. Said Triway Titan basketball. We had basketballs. We had just all kinds of different things, and it brought the brand to our school. And what we did was just keep taking all the money and putting it back into the store. Every time we sold something for a profit, the money would go back into buying more stuff. And literally we had, I would say, 50 or 60 items that said Triway basketball on them. And then when we went to the state, you can imagine how that just boomed. You did that at, St. Thomas, and we had all the T-shirts at St. John's Arena, were bought through our purple store. So
yeah, I think this is just such a brilliant concept, because I think most coaches, they feel like they're competing against the teams on their schedule, and you are smart enough to understand that you're competing against the teams in your area for attention. And you put your brand right up there with Worcester, who's a bigger school than you, and you made Triway a bigger deal than Worcester, and you took them on even though they weren't probably your rival, or even on your schedule. I don't know if you guys played them or not. But another thing that I really liked that you did, that I copied in my coaching career, was this idea of a media guide. And this is an example of one that I created. And a lot of coaches or basketball programs, they might have a winter program, which has a lot of ads, and it might have a roster and a team picture. But you and I took it to another level, where we made a whole magazine about our basketball program, put it in full color, and really promoted our program through that. So talk to me a little bit about this concept, this idea of using a media guide to promote your program.
Well, that originally came from being with Coach Huggins. When I went to Walsh College as his assistant, he was coming in from Ohio State, where he was a GA. And when we got the job at Walsh, we had our first meeting. I remember sitting in the staff meeting, and he held up the Ohio State press guide, which was full color. And he said, "This is what we're going to use to separate us from other schools." And back in 1980, which was when we took that job, there were no color press guides. Everything was black and white in high school. Now, Ohio State had color, in the Big Ten, and that level had it, but no high schools. Everybody had ads in them, and it was all done for fundraising. So his idea was, we're going to put a 4-color press guide together, and this press guide is what we're going to take with us when we recruit. And when we come out, a kid comes out after the game, and Anthony Moglen, for example, we hand it to Anthony, say, "Hi, I'm from Walsh College." And, Malone might be there as well. Urbana might be there as well. They weren't going to have a color press guide. So it really separated us from that. So when I left and Bob went to Central Florida, and I was going to go to Triway for just a year or two, and, kind of see how that went. And then I just decided, why can't we do this at Triway? Why can't we make a color press guide? And then one of my best friends in coaching was Carl Creamer at Moeller, who also had a color press guide. But, it was expensive, but find a way. I remember Hugs telling me, any big time idea you have, bring it to me. I don't care what it costs. Just bring me the ideas, and we're gonna do it. So we did some amazing things at Walsh. We got a barn out there on Market Street that you've probably driven by many times. But back in 1980 to 83, that barn was painted Walsh College basketball.
Yeah.
And we went by there one day, and I said, "Wow, wouldn't that be a cool billboard?" And Hugs pulled right into the drive. He said, yeah, it would. Let's go up here and ask him. So we went right up to the door, and the guy answered, and I was thinking, oh boy, this is not going to go well. And we said, can we paint your barn? Walsh College Cavaliers basketball. And he said, yeah, just use good paint. That was his only comment. So we had that. Yeah, that I still have pictures of that barn. But that's the kind of thing Hug did, and it's certainly the things that we did for promotion wise. And we had the nicest press guide. I think we had the nicest locker room back in the 80s, of anybody around, because it was just promotion, and there was no reason you couldn't, do something that, would make you stand out from other people. And Jack Reynolds was that way at Barberton. He believed the Barberton Magics, and there's our stationery, which we sent out to college coaches, or anytime I wrote a note to anybody regarding Triway basketball, I would write it on our stationery. And I got a lot of comments from college coaches and different people about how nice that was. And Paul Brown was a coach at Massillon High School, and then of course Browns and Bengals. He said it only cost a few extra dollars to go first class. So we kind of took that to heart and did that over the years at Triway and Hoover.
Yeah, it's fun to think about Huggins just starting out his career. A lot of people are thinking about Huggins at WVU or Cincinnati, the big time, the top coaching. But when he was just starting out, he was scrapping like every other high school coach who just wanted to build their program into the best thing that they could make it. And it was stuff like painting the barns. You did things like putting schedule posters all around town. So, back in the day, before information was more available, you had to get the word out when your games were and where they were at. So you went to different businesses. You had these posters made, which probably had your team slogan on it, your team picture, and your schedule. And you're making sure everybody in the community knew when your games were so they could come support in person. You did things like restaurant placemats, where you made a partnership with a restaurant. You printed the records of your basketball program on the placemat, and you had an agreement with this restaurant where they would use your placemats, and in return, everybody that ate at their diner got to look at your basketball program records, and you were promoting your program in that diner. And it's just through thinking outside of the box. Do you have any kind of final thoughts on creating a community identity through branding or making basketball visible wherever you're at?
Well, back, when I was in high school, John Cabas at Salem was the ultimate promoter. And a lot of those ideas came directly from him. We had to buy our Chuck Taylor shoes at the downtown news stand place. And in order to get your shoes, you had to go into Farrier's News and walk back to the back. And as you walk back to the back, you had to pick up a Salem basketball schedule, a poster, and all the things that went along with Salem basketball. And we wore sport coats with a Salem emblem on the chest. Again, I grew up with that as my tradition, and everybody wanted to be like a varsity player at Salem High School. And we took charter buses to big games. I thought everybody did that. And I actually took probably 3 or 4 charter buses a year, to go to Barberton or to go to Steubenville or somewhere. We didn't take a school bus. We took a charter bus, and that cost money. I went to college and I talked to guys about that, and I thought, well, everybody did that, but actually nobody did that. So, and it's even, it's obsolete today, except maybe if you're going to the state tournament.
Yeah, you were a master at this branding. And I thought another thing that you did really well was engaging your youth program to keep that pipeline stocked. You had success at Triway, success at Hoover, which I got to witness firsthand. And a lot of that is you continued to have viable players coming through your program because of the hype and hysteria that you created at the youth levels. Talk to me a little bit about some of the strategy that you would have used to engage the players within your own community at the youth levels.
Well, the first thing I did at Triway was attack the youth program and establish a youth league with Triway kids. And then, I looked for a director, somebody that could actually direct what I wanted to do, because I didn't want to be doing that all winter with those kids. I wanted to do it, but I just didn't have time. So finding the right person to do these things is really critical. Don't just find a person. Don't just find a dad, because if you find a dad, that dad wants to move on with his son. And then you're going to have that same situation a year or two later. Find somebody that enjoys that, and they're in your community. You just have to find them. The same thing with the Wizards. I saw the ball handling show that we put on at halftime was something I saw. Sean Miller, who was the coach at Arizona, he's been all over the place. Sean, he was a youngster in
he's
the
at
very
Texas.
first,
He's at Texas now.
Texas. Yeah, he was at Xavier and Texas. His father was the head coach over in Pennsylvania at Blackhawk. And I saw Blackhawk and Canton McKinley play in Canton, and the halftime show was the Blackhawk kids. And there was Sean Miller out there doing, all these drills with his buddies. It was like watching the Harlem Globetrotters. I told Becky, who was with me, I said, that would be cool. So I went back and I started to look for the right person to put that program in place. And I got all the Maravich tapes and, some of the Sean Miller tapes and different things he had as he went through his career. And we put together what was called the Triway Wizards. And every kid that went through played on my program went through the Wizards. My last probably 12 or 14 years at least. And they learned to handle the ball. There was no playing, no shooting. It was all 1 hour a week of ball handling. And then he would put them into a formation, and they would, do script, Ohio or script Triway, and they would spin the ball and hit it off their head and make it. They got to where they were so good. They were halftime shows at the Cleveland Cavs. They were halftime show of the Globetrotters. They played in they actually marched in the Macy's parade.
Coach,
and I think that was a foundation.
Yeah. I got footage of your Hoover group performing, and we'll show the audience of what this performance looked like. But you came in and you straightened things out where you developed this system of, we have an in-house league and then travel leagues. And what happens with coaches around here is everybody's using that format now. I think you were an innovator in putting that together. But what that does is the in-house league, it engages everyone in the community, where anybody who wants to play basketball can be a part of something. And then you're also separating off your best players to play in travel leagues, where they can go out and play against other communities' best players. So what happens is, you don't want to just have an in-house league, because that's not going to serve your best players the best way possible, because they're not going to go see what the best players are like in the other communities. But you also want to have something that serves just the common student that's interested in basketball. That's your in-house league. So you got those leagues straightened out. You did innovative things like getting highlight tapes made of your varsity team and distributing them to your youth players, just to create more hype and hysteria around the basketball program, getting them to envision themselves being a part of that varsity program at some time. But then we're looking at the Hoopsters here from Hoover. You talked about doing this at Triway with the Wizards. But this is one of the most amazing program builders that I think is out there. And it's heavy lifting. It's a lot to organize something like this. But if you can get something like this rolling, it's like a cheat code because it hits your program in so many positive ways. You've got the kids in your community that are learning how to handle a ball, basic ball handling moves. You've got them in their orange and black. They're your school colors, coming to the games, being on the varsity floor in front of the varsity crowd. There's parents. So all these kids that we're watching in the video, their parents aren't sitting at home during this game. They're bringing their kids and they're watching the varsity, and you're like indoctrinating the whole community into being addicted to this varsity basketball program while you're generating skills for the future players of the program. Talk to me a little bit more about some of the benefits of running this, what I would call a little dribblers program, which you dubbed as the Hoopsters and the Wizards at your school, your Hoover and Triway stops.
Well, the ball handling in general was really, a plus because, for us to get to the state tournament, I'm sure Blackhawk felt that way in Pennsylvania. You had to be able to handle the ball, spread the floor, be able to handle the ball, like we see even in the NBA today, the way guys can handle the ball. These kids here, after they go through, 2 years or 3 years of that, they move on in, transition on into middle school, 7th and 8th grade, where they work on primarily our back door. And then, they get into high school. Just look at the abilities that they have to be able to run a four corners and run your motion offense and different things. So it was a tremendous benefit, twofold in that it brought people originally to the games, but our games at Triway or at Hoover, both places really were often sold out. So those kids were performing in front of sold out venues, and then going to Cleveland Cavaliers games and performing at halftime there, or Ohio State halftime shows where people would be watching them. So it was good for their nerves. It was good for their confidence. And of course, obviously it was good for them to handle the basketball just like they are in that clips there.
Yeah, I think it's just incredible. They're for participating, they're going to get a basketball that they can take home and practice with. They're going to get a homework assignment where you're bringing them in once a week to practice the dribbling routine, but you're also giving them drills that they can go do at home. So you're also teaching them how to practice basketball outside of a basketball setting. How early do you think is the appropriate time to trying to get these elementary school kids feeling connected to the varsity program?
Well, I was a little bit different. I only had 5th and 6th graders begin in our organized programs, both in the Wizards and in organized competitive play. For that reason, I think it's just important that kids kind of grow and they're a little too young, really. And then when you're doing this program, we would have 5th and 6th graders try out. What I found after a while was 6th graders didn't want to be in shows with 5th graders.
Yeah.
So if you were a 5th grader and you made the quote A team, or you made the Wizards, we had 2 teams, and the A team was made up of mostly 6th graders and maybe a star 7th or 5th grader that really you can see them doing different, and kids would go home and work on different drills and different things that they could become proficient at, and then use that to audition, so to speak, for the A team. And I think if you go down to 3rd and 4th grade, this is not for just participation. This is for drill skill development. So I only had 5th and 6th graders, and if you didn't make the A team, oh well, you had to go work on it.
Yeah, you got
better. Yeah, you got better, we incorporated you into the show. If you weren't able to do it, then you didn't perform.
Yeah, you've got an in-house league that everybody can participate in, but then you've got these advanced things with the travel leagues and the Hoopsters here, where there's a threshold that kids have to meet to participate, and you're creating demand. You're creating a waiting list essentially for kids that want to participate in something like this. And obviously, winning at the varsity level creates a good environment. But coupling it with ideas like this, I think, is just a home run. And a lot of coaches out there, if they're wanting to start something like this, they may have to incorporate some of the lower grades, and they may have to just take anybody that wants to do it. But as you keep building it, you can get it to a place where, hopefully, like you got it, where there's a wait list of kids that want to participate, and you can set that threshold high. This is one of my all-time favorite program builders. And I actually ran it for Coach Pato at East Canton for a couple seasons, where I was the guy blowing the whistle and changing the drills and teaching the routine to kids. But moving on into this program building, which I think you're such a master at, I think one of the things that you did really well is you exposed your players to excellence. You got them to kind of see that up close. And what I'm referring to here is you started this program where you started taking college visits, where you were taking your teams to a location of their choice, watching a basketball practice, and you've got a team bonding element where preseason your kids are spending time with each other, but they're also getting to see some of the top programs in the country and what a Division I practice looks like. Talk to me a little bit about this program building element of doing a college visit each season.
Well, again, back in the late 70s, even with Coach Huggins, we went to watch practices at Indiana where Bobby Knight was coaching, and different places you could get in as a staff and watch Dean Smith or whoever initiate their practices. So I was at one time, and I took my staff at Triway, and on the way home, I thought, man, wouldn't this be great for the kids to see? So when I got back home, I called out to Indiana and talked to Bobby Knight, who was from near where Triway is. He's from Orrville, Ohio. And I said, Coach, we love coming. Appreciate it. Would it be okay if we'd ever bring our team out? And he said, sure. He said, I think that's a great idea. He said, but, tell them not to say one word or I'll throw them out. And he meant it. And so we were at practices. I took the team the next year. I got 3 vans donated for the weekend, and we went out to Indiana. We went to the bookstore. I had my whole team with me. We had a blast. We stayed in a hotel room one night and traveled and ate together and went to the bookstores, as I said. And then at 3:00, we walked over to the assembly hall, and we sat 4 rows up and watched Bobby Knight, teaching Isaiah Thomas and the Indiana Hoosiers the drills for 2.5 hours. And the kids were mesmerized. When we came out of there, it mission accomplished, because all the things I felt when I walked out of those sessions, they felt. And when we went home, we'd take them home on that Friday night. We'd leave after practice at 6, drive back to Triway or Hoover, and we'd be back about midnight. And then we would start practice on Monday after school. And there was a whole new appreciation for practice, because as you know, you've been to those practices. You go to Kentucky or any of those schools that you see on your screen there. We went to all those, and I don't know why coaches don't do that. We went to North Carolina 4 or 5 times. We went to Duke. We went to Kentucky. We went to every one of those coaches treated our kids like gold. And we got to see their locker rooms, and you can imagine as a high school kid going into North Carolina's locker room and seeing great players right in front of you, and those kids maybe giving you a handshake or a hug, or it was a tremendous experience. So I did that probably out of the 35 years I was a head coach. I bet I did that 32 times. And like I said, wherever the seniors wanted to go, next year seniors, then I would say at the end of the season, I would wait a while and then ask them over the summer. I said, well, you guys want to go for our preseason trip? And one of the group liked Michigan. You know, they had like the Fab Five. So
Yeah.
I called Michigan. They said, sure, bring them up. We went to Michigan. Of course, when Huggins was at West Virginia and Cincinnati, you know, I had special access. I could take the kids into the locker rooms and get on the floor. Actually, we went down, sat right on the floor for practice. And I don't know if there's anything better that you can do for your team, to be honest.
Yeah. You're letting your players see, you know, elite standards up close. If your players are thinking, Coach Montgomery's pretty hard on me, having them watch a practice that Bobby Knight runs probably opens their eyes that there's a high standards other places than just in your gymnasium. What was your personal favorite trip that you went on, whether it was watching a coach in their element or a bonding experience with a group that you had?
Well, each one of those were exciting and fun. UK, we went down. Tubby Smith was the head coach, and you know, we were about 6 rows up, and he looked over at us, and he had a puzzled look on his face. And then he went through practice, and after practice, he came walking up towards us, and he looked at me and he says, "Who told you guys? Who gave you permission to be in here?" And I thought, "Uh-oh, we're in trouble." I said, "Well, I called your office, and I didn't get to talk to you, but I talked to your secretary, and she put me in touch with a coach." And he said, "Oh, okay, no problem." He said, "Come with me." So he took us down to the locker room. He had a smoothie machine. He gave every kid a smoothie. He took me and my staff up to his office, and we saw the national championship trophy that they had just won. That was pretty cool, you know, to be in Rupp Arena watching practice. North Carolina, Dean Smith was so gracious, took us down on the floor, and they have a huge, all these campuses have their own basketball halls of fame. And, you know, you can go in and see the facilities with your kids. Syracuse, you get to see different guys, how they work too. Jim Boeheim was so loosey-goosey. You know, we went to Syracuse, and he was not very organized, but he was extremely successful and very, functional in what he did. But, you know, it was a different experience than going to Indiana, where Bobby Knight had it typed out. Every minute was spoken for, and a lot more loosey-goosey things going on. And since at Syracuse, the guys were loose, the players were loose, but nonetheless, they were still very good. And, you know, we went to Louisville, we went to Duke, Coach Krzyzewski, you know, we went there. That was an experience. And these aren't clinics, you know, where the coaches have a certain mantra. These are their practice. They're at work, and they're screaming, they're swearing, they're yelling.
Yeah.
So you get to see it right up close. They weren't doing anything for you. They were doing it for them, and that's what I wanted to see.
Yeah, another program builder that I would doubt gets replicated anywhere else in the country is a college league that you put together. And this is interesting because you invited local colleges to come play in your gymnasium throughout the summer. And you had Division II, Division III, different schools come in, and one high school team, which was your team. So your team got to play against college teams. I doubt that worked out very well for you on the scoreboard, but it got your players used to playing against bigger and stronger kids. Lots of coaches try to replicate this, where they might bring in adults to play against their kids in open gym, but you have a formal setting with referees and a scoreboard where you're playing against Division III and Division II colleges. So you're hosting these teams, you're taking care of the officials, you're providing the facilities, and all the college coaches had to do was send their team and not take it easy on the high school team when it was your turn to play them. Talk a little bit about this idea, and maybe just from a big picture standpoint, what you're trying to accomplish with this college league.
Well, I was always looking for better competition for our guys. And in the summertime, I would actually drive them over, as you know, over to Operation Positive. You know, I'd bring my Triway guys over there, and, you know, they would play in those leagues there. And at that time, back in the 80s, that was the place to be. You had Gary Grant and, all the great players from Canton were over there playing. But it was a long drive. And I said, I wonder what I could do around Triway that would simulate that. So I called College of Worcester coach, and I said, if I had a summer league in the summer and we played 3 games a night, you would play one of those 3, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, or 8 o'clock. If I had 6 teams and 2 played those 3 games, if I could get you, Ashland, again, Mount Union was there, Worcester, Wayne College did it over at Triway. But when we came to Hoover, that was one of the things that I had as a stipulation before I would accept the job, is that we could run one of these nice summer leagues there, and they agreed to that. And we brought Mount Union, we brought Malone, Walsh, Worcester. We had an alumni team of college guys that were back in the area. They started to flock, and they wanted to play in the league. And I always told all of them, I'll pay it for everything, all the operational fees, but don't forfeit. I never had a forfeit in 30 years. I said, don't forfeit, and play hard when you're playing against us. And we were one of the 6 teams. So each week I would run 3 games a night just so that my guys could play one of those. And it was very beneficial, I felt, over the 30 years we did it. We probably won 4 times, and but you're playing against Walsh College, 6'11" centers and guards that were 6'3", 6'2".
It's amazing that you won any of the games. I had a similar experience where, I was coaching at St. Thomas Aquinas, and we joined the North Coast League. So we had to start playing home and away games each year against state powers like Villa Angela, St. Joe's, Cleveland Central Catholic. And those games could be tough some years. We did pull some upsets and beat some of those teams. But when we got into our tournament as a smaller, more rural school, the game felt like slow motion because we were used to battling state powers with kids that didn't look like our kids. And I can just imagine, your players getting toughened up mentally and physically from participating in a league like that. And again, I would doubt that is something that has been replicated anywhere across the country, being able to organize and pull that off. And it's, such unique thinking to battle test your kids through that way. And no matter what the scoreboard says, if you lose the game, you're supposed to lose the game. So you don't even need to worry about, if you're winning the games or not. It's interesting that you did pull off some of those wins, a high school team beating a college team. But just the idea of getting your kids comfortable playing against bigger and stronger kids, I think that's incredible, Coach. Sticking with this program building theme, another idea that I took off of you and did my own thing with was the idea of this tip-off dinner. So tip-off dinner is a dinner to start the season where you're bringing your entire community in, and you probably have a featured speaker of some sort, but you're getting up there as a coach. You're talking about your program. You're talking about the different levels of your program. You're introducing the community to yourself and your coaches. You're having fundraisers where you're auctioning off items, or you might be doing a 50-50 raffle or something like that. But you're building excitement before the season, which is always an important time because you hadn't cut a kid yet, or you might have had cuts already, but you haven't lost the game yet. So there's a lot of enthusiasm for the season, and you're really making basketball feel important by giving the community a night of entertainment and also promoting your program. Talk to me a little bit about this tip-off dinner concept that you mastered.
Well, we did that. We started at Hoover, primarily because it was a bigger community. The financial resources were a little bit higher. So somebody had an idea in the community. Why don't we have a dinner? I said, yeah, that's great. But if we're going to do it, let's really do a good one. So again, Dean Chance, who was a Cy Young Award winner, was roommates with Charlie Manuel when he played for Minnesota Twins. Of course, Charlie Manuel and Jim Thome were tight. So our first tip-off dinner, we didn't have much time to put together, was Dean Chance, Charlie Manuel, and it was going to be Jim Thome. And Jim Thome's wife had a baby literally that day. And he lived up in Cleveland, and he was so apologetic, but he did meet us a couple weeks later and signed all kinds of things for us, and just a great guy. Jim Thome is everything they say he is. But anyway, we started off with that, and then the next year we decided, let's blow this thing up, and we charged $100 a ticket with a $25 additional ticket allowed to be used for a meal. So if you and your wife came, it was $125. And you would come, and there would be a silent auction of different items out there, nice steak dinner, and then you'd have a nice speaker there. You can see the speakers that we had: Larry Siegfried, Ron Blackledge, Dick Snyder, and then Jared Tarkanian came in. Larry Johnson played for UNLV. Austin Carr, Bobby Plump was the guy in Hoosiers that made the shot. He was the real life Jimmy Chitwood, and then Joe Tate and Jerry Lucas was our last speaker. So we had some big speakers, and we always sold out. What we did was we would use our resources. People in the community know people. You have people around like a CJ McCollum is a Gleno grad. If you wanted to have a tip-off dinner when he retires and you brought him back, he'd sell the place out, and it would be great for everybody. So that's what we did. I think it's a good idea to do. We made over $20,000 each time we did it. I had John Wooden things that I auctioned off. Each year I went out to visit Coach Wooden. I'd have him sign a ball that we would auction off, and I was working at LeBron James's camp. He would sign a jersey, and I auctioned 2 or 3 of those for like $1,000 a piece. So, that all money went to the program and certainly helped us to be first class in what we were doing. But it was a great idea. It's a lot of work. Like you said, all this stuff is heavy lifting. You try to take your team to North Carolina to watch practice. You got to be well organized, and it's going to cost you some money. But, look what it does for your program.
Yeah, it is heavy lifting. But I would say that when you put stuff like this in place, it gets easier every year that you do it. The hardest time to do it is the first time you do it, and then you build those connections and you build those habits that make it easier. You ran more of a classier event. Mine was kind of scaled down, where instead of having celebrity speakers, we might have, like we're looking at this poster now, the Fox Boys, who had both played at Ohio State. One played at Ohio State, one played football at Penn State, and one had went to the NFL. I had a superintendent of schools that was a former basketball coach, Jim Nicodemo, be one of our featured speakers. But you're also creating this connection to your alumni with the way that I did it, where I had the Fox Boys and I had Jim Nicodemo, and they felt connected to what we were doing with the basketball program, where if I ever needed a favor or I ever needed their help with something, they were willing to do it because I spent a night honoring them at our tip-off dinner. And you've got a booster club in place where our booster club would put together raffle baskets, mostly donated stuff. We'd find memorabilia that people would donate, and we could raffle that off, and it would turn into a big fundraiser for us. So I think this is a nice contrast for the audience of understanding the concept of a tip-off dinner, but also seeing that there's multiple ways to do it. You could do it like how you did it, where you had celebrities and it was higher ticket, or you could do a more scaled down version. And it's more about what fits your community, not necessarily one being better than the others. Did you think those events helped make the players feel like they were a part of something special before the season started?
Well, the players didn't come because there was alcohol. It was basically turned into a gala. where the wives would come and they would do all the mothers would get all the silent auction stuff, and the fathers would come and they would, they'd have drinks that night. Everybody just had we had a cocktail hour. We had a meet and greet, if you paid an extra, $100 or something, you could go down into the private area and meet Jerry Tarkanian or whoever we had and have a picture taken with them and so forth and so on. But those are things, as you said, Matt, they just happen as the thing goes on over the course of years. Different people take charge of it. But we didn't have the kids there. That was usually on a Friday night, the first week of practice. So practice would end at 3:00. And if I had a good speaker, I'd bring them to practice that day before they spoke. I had Tarkanian come and Larry Johnson and Austin Carr. Those guys all came to practice and then spoke to our guys. Then I'd send the guys home for the evening and we'd go party, have fun. And it was an awesome, classy event. A lot of work to begin with, but after we got it going, it was going full go and certainly a fun thing to do.
Yeah, that's interesting that you didn't have the players there. I always had the players involved, and I even did things like we would have open scrimmages where we might involve the entire program, where prior to our tip-off dinner, we would have the 7th grade scrimmage, the 8th grade, the 9th grade scrimmage, the JV, the varsity team scrimmage, another one of our varsity teams, like a split squad scrimmage, where everybody could come early. They could watch their kid participate in these scrimmages. Then we would migrate up to the dining hall and have this tip-off dinner. And it's just a beautiful idea of getting the community excited about what's happening, get them in your gym, celebrating some of the history of your program. And I could do these program builders with you all night, but we do have other things to get into. But before that, I wanted to hit on just one more of these because I think this is another brilliant idea that you had. And that is the idea of hosting a 3-on-3 tournament. So I know you did this at Triway, and it became a pretty big thing. But I'd like to hear how you used a off-season 3-on-3 tournament to promote your program at Triway.
Well, yeah, that was when I first took the job at Triway. The Gus Macker was big. It was actually featured in Sports Illustrated back in the mid 80s. And we had a small 3-on-3. My assistant coach, Keith Snoddy, helped organize that. And we had a small one the first year. And I said, Keith, same thing. Why think small? Let's make a Gus Macker in our parking lot. We had a huge parking lot. And we set out at that point in time to make it like a Gus Macker. And so long story short, we went to Terry Cook was a guy that was involved with our program, and he went with us to George Lamb Chevrolet and said, we want to build baskets, portable baskets. We want to put circus tents. We're going to bring pro players in for clinics, and we're going to have hot air balloons, and then we're going to have the whole state's going to come play basketball for a weekend at Triway parking lot. And literally that's kind of what happened. I mean, we had 500 people playing on 12 different courts at a time. It turned into an incredible weekend of basketball. I don't think they do it much anymore because of maybe the liability of it all. Our school agreed to allow us to have it and to cover us insurance-wise. George Lamb Chevrolet bought all the baskets. They put $10,000 up cash. And that was back in 1983 or 84. So that was a lot of money.
Yeah. And
you can see the posters there, the people. We had, Bingo Smith that played for the Cleveland Cavaliers played, Larry Huggins, Jojo Kubik. We had all kinds of major college players. And the card dealer gave the first prize of the open division was 4 tickets to the NCAA Final Four, believe it or not. And you can imagine once that word spread that was the prize, we had them coming in from all over the place. major college players from Syracuse. Marcus Godbout came from Syracuse, and just Joe Jakubik was at Akron playing at that time, was a phenomenal player. Larry Huggins at Ohio State, Granville Waiters. They came from all over the place because they wanted to win that top prize. And fantastic. I mean, with thousands of people coming in and out of there. It was like Keith and I looked at each other after this thing was up. We thought, holy cow, what did we create? But, those are just, and you got to have a wife, like you said, that says, sure, go do it. Go spend our, the 1 week we have off. Go paint, the lines for the 3-on-3 tournament at the high school for this week, and put the circus tent up, and then weekend we'll spend all over there. So it was a very, very important part of building, a community tradition.
Yeah. The basketball part of it is one thing, and it became a huge community event. But you've got billboards going up that are promoting Triway basketball. You've got all these people coming from all over the state to participate at this thing at Triway. You're establishing Triway as a name, and it's like branding, where it's repetition, and they keep getting hit over the head, where they're seeing the, purple clothes, Triway this, come to Triway. And all of a sudden, Triway basketball has emerged as this big thing. I really enjoyed talking those program builders with you, Coach. But a lot of these ideas, I think, were ahead of their time, but I think they had to come from somewhere. So before, Triway and Hoover, you grew up around serious basketball people and in serious basketball towns. I know we touched on Salem a little bit already, but I want to go back to Salem and talk about some of the coaches who shaped the way that you saw the game, because I think before you were building programs yourself, you got to kind of grow up inside basketball programs. So talk to me a little bit about the influence of John Cabas at Salem, where you played your high school basketball.
Well, John Cabas was, he was way ahead of his time in the 60s. As I said, we had 1,200 season ticket holders at Salem. Excuse me. And Friday nights, that's where he wanted you to be, and the crowd, the town was there. It was a basketball rabid place. All the things that we've talked about here tonight, he tried a lot of those things and got us all excited about, becoming a Quaker. And he was the first president of the Ohio High School Basketball Coaches Association. He was also, he's in the Hall of Fame there. And, my brother played 5 years ahead of me. So we followed my brother all the way through high school. And then he played at Youngstown State when they were very good. And that's where I really got into basketball, was watching all those games. And then, of course, Friday nights, Coach Cabas would always play the first game of the year would be the state champion from the previous year. In other words, if Barberton won the state championship, he would call Barberton, the week after they won it and say, if you come to Salem, we'll give you $5,000 to open the first game. He always did that. And we played Columbus East, we played Walnut Ridge, we played Boardman, we played Barberton, we played all these teams that he brought in, and the fans knew it. So the season tickets were sold. He knew he had 1,200 tickets sold, and the AD worked with him, and that's how they did it. And what a great idea. We did that at Triway, brought Dayton Jefferson in, brought Youngstown Rayin in, brought Oak Hill Academy in with Jerry Stackhouse and McGinnis and Dr. Ninjai. You just got to think big, don't think small, think big and go for it. And if you do that, I think you can see that things like this can happen. And that's exactly what it was like at Salem. And then I went on at Youngstown State. I walked on there and made the team. I was a part of the team. I was not a great player by any stretch, but I was a part of the team, and certainly got to play at that level. I mean, it was another legendary coach, Dom Roselli, and legendary basketball crowds. Youngstown State had sellout crowds, and it was fun. Just really got me interested in wanting to be a coach.
Yeah, you'd mentioned Coach Caddis doing things like having the steak dinners for you guys, wearing the Blazers to school, having pep bands for home and away games, treating basketball like it was something important. Do you think growing up in that environment, it helped you realize how basketball could become powerful inside of a community?
Yeah, exactly. And I'd forgotten about a couple of those things, but every away game I played in high school from my sophomore year on, JV and varsity, we ate a steak dinner, sit down at a fine restaurant, Timberlanes in Salem, after every away game. So we would come home from somewhere, win, lose, or draw. We lost at Barberton by 30 points. We came back to Salem, got in our cars, drove to Timberlanes, and everybody sat there together, and we ate a steak dinner for all 3 years. What an incredible experience, and expensive. But John Cabas believed in that, and he got the Booster Club behind him, and they did it. The pep band, I remember our pep band going to any away game that the other team would let them come. So they would just call. I know Gordy Kendall's one of my friends today. He said we'd call Boardman or we'd call Youngstown South, and we'd say, can we bring our pep band? And if they didn't have a pep band, a lot of times they said, sure. So we would go to the other team's gym and have our pep band playing. Amazing, and John Cabas was behind all that, and certainly, did his part to promote the Salem winning tradition, as he called it.
Yeah, you'd mentioned your basketball world starting to expand beyond Salem, where you're getting this exposure to YSU. You're following your brother. You're watching Billy Johnson play basketball, and you're getting around Coach Dom Roselli. What really did this deepen your love for the game of basketball, having this experience where you're following your brother around and watching Billy Johnson play?
Oh yeah, Billy was a showman. He didn't just play the game; he was a showman. He'd go behind his back, and Billy well, and of course Chuck was playing with him. My brother was a great basketball player, great athlete, and he could shoot. And their team was good. They were number 2 in the country. Most of their all 3 years, they fought for national championships. And playing in high school gyms, basically big high school gyms, Struthers Fieldhouse and South Fieldhouse. And then when I went to Youngstown, we had Bigley Center, which is today's gym there. It holds 6,000 people. And Youngstown back in the 70s, had 300,000 people living around there. So the gyms were full, but since the steel mills left and so forth, it's not nearly as populated. And, we played many games at YSU, complete sellouts. And that just got you excited. I wanted to play as high as I could play. And I like I said, I never did, become any kind of a good player at that level, but I was young, and I just enjoyed the experiences of being there and being, having buddies that we still have reunions and go with today, which I think is something that's a problem with NIL. You're not going to have any of those kinds of situations anymore. And it was incredible in the 70s. We played a lot of good teams, a lot of good. Pitt came in when they were ranked, I think, 6th in the country and played at YSU. Ohio U was very good when they had Walter Luckett and some good players. So it was all that just kind of, helped me to foster my love for what I did. And I tried to pick up everything. Coach Roselli was way different than Coach Cabas. Coach Cabas was right out in front of everybody. He was the picture of the program. Coach Roselli was just a very mild-mannered, competitive, small in stature, 5'6", Italian coach who was like your father, and a very good person, good coach, understood talent, and he knew how to, how to get it out of you and find good players, which he did with guys like Billy.
So you're not just loving basketball at this point, but you're starting to study it a little bit. You're getting around serious coaches like Ed McCluskey and Charlie Huggins, Bob's dad. And those relationships really begin to kind of shape your basketball philosophy. Talk to me a little bit about what you might have learned from Coach McCluskey. What did he teach you about offense and defense?
Well, my brother Chuck that played at YSU, Ed McCluskey called Youngstown and called Don Roselli and said he had an opening for an assistant coach. Do you have anybody? And Coach Roselli said, I got Chuck Montgomery, who's a phys ed major, and he would be great. So my brother got hired as Ed McCluskey's last assistant coach at Farrell. So I got to see that program up close and personal as well. McCluskey was probably the greatest coach in high school, maybe ever. I mean, he was legendary. 7 state championships. The only school that beat Wilt Chamberlain in high school. Great coach at Farrell High School. And we spent a lot of time around him. Now, Charlie Huggins, Bob's dad, literally spent 5 years practically living with Ed McCluskey, doing everything he did. He drove him to every clinic he went to. He went to all of his camps and worked and did everything he could in preparation for his career, which was legendary in Ohio. Once Charlie came to Ohio and became the head coach in Ohio, well, he won 3 state titles and was in the Final Four 10 times and was legendary. And, of course, his sons, Larry, Harry, and Bob, were all great players, major college players, and Bob Huggins is Bob Huggins. He's in the Naismith Hall of Fame. So a lot of what I learned at Walsh was done through the Huggins family, which was directly came from Ed McCluskey, who I had the connection with my brother. So we spent a lot of time around Coach McCluskey, and he was a master of tremendous defensive coach and a great offensive mind as well. Very, very, very disciplined. And I'm sure Coach Huggins Sr. there, Charlie, would tell you that, he was the greatest influence on him across his career as well.
So you're growing up in this kind of Bob Knight era of coaching where what a coach says is kind of the final word. What was different about coaching back then compared to towards the end of your career?
Well, discipline, first and foremost. If you watch the movie Hoosiers, Norman Dale, as corny as that was, my word is gospel. What I say, you do. And if I take you out of the game, there's a reason. And that was very vogue back then. Bob Knight was a taskmaster. Charlie Huggins was a taskmaster. He would have a day in October, at the end of October, when you would say goodbye to your girl and you were not to see her again on a date until the season was over. And if he saw you, you were off the team. You wore a tie on game day, all the things that strict discipline, just imagine, that today. Now, was there good and bad to that? Sure. There was, I think way more good than there was bad. It was militaristic, but you bonded with your players and they bonded with you. And by the end of the year, you had a completely different team than you had at the start. Today, they just leave. They go and get in the transfer portal and go somewhere else where it's comfortable. And I don't think that's not necessarily teaching you anything about life, because life is full of ups and downs. Things happen in our lives that we never envisioned were going to happen. And basketball certainly taught me to handle, ups and downs that would come along.
Yeah, I think about my coaching career, and a coach like John Wooden, who would tell players that they couldn't have facial hair, or couldn't have long hair. I couldn't imagine trying to tell my players, that they couldn't have facial hair, that they couldn't even wear a shooting sleeve. I remember getting, players and families pushing back against me where they didn't want to wear the team shoe that we were providing them, or they had a medical reason why they needed to wear an arm sleeve, when in actuality they just thought that they look cool with an arm sleeve. But I definitely think in today's coaching environment, the toughness and the discipline is a lot harder to build. But Coach McCluskey, I believe, was a pioneer and an influence for you in terms of his pressure defensive system and also his motion offensive system. And part of that is something that I copied into my coaching career. And it starts with a, 5-out backdoor concept, where all we're looking at here on some film as I get it pulled up is a pass and cut offense that could be built into a variety of things. But these are my teams running what I would call backdoor motion. And basically, we would kind of spread you high and wide. We would pass, cut, and fill. If we were denied, we would hit a backdoor cut. And we were looking to pass to players as they made backdoor cuts, and we were looking to drive double gaps. So this is a great foundational concept for any basketball coach out there, where you could implement something like this at your lower levels, and you're teaching them to pass, cut, fill, a lot of the fundamentals of the game. It could also work as your base offense. It could even work as a stall offense, which is what I more or less used it as, is more of a tempo control, where we could bring it all the way out to half court if we wanted to, or we could run the offense closer to the 3-point line if teams weren't willing to kind of chase us around. But I had a ton of success with this, using it as a stall, where when I had guard-heavy teams, if we got up 6 or 8 points, we would go to something like this, and we could just put games away by forcing teams to overextend and taking advantage of that. Talk to me a little bit about Coach McCluskey's influence with you in this kind of motion offensive system, and maybe some of the differences on how I ran it versus your interpretation of the offense.
Well, his execution was strict. You'll always cut behind your man. If you cut in front of your man, he would pull you out of the game. He might slap you. You cut behind your man. You take your man up so high and cut behind. He was always standing there at practice yelling, "Cut behind." Like number 2 there, that's coming out right there. You're setting your offense. He should cut behind his man. Number 4 could cut behind his man. And you're running an open post, so there is no post play, and you're forcing the other team to come out and guard you, especially when they're losing. You said the word stall. I never saw a stall in my 35 years. I saw some patience. How many times did we ever hold the ball longer than 35 seconds? Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I have a lot of footage of us ever holding the ball longer than that. Just like this possession right here. You say, well, that's maybe a stall. Look at how long before they shoot. It won't be 35 seconds. It might be 25. But you can run this, and sooner or later they get tired of playing defense. That guy just got a bucket within 7 seconds. Here you are. Running another offensive set. You're cutting behind there at St. Joe's, a very athletic team. 5, 6, 7, 8. Got a shot off. Here you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you so forth. So it's a great passing drill. It was used as a passing drill. I know Bob Huggins, we used it a lot to improve our fundamentals, passing, our footwork, cutting Coach McCluskey used chairs. He would put chairs out there, and you'd have to run this 5-on-0 for an hour until, he liked it. But
yeah, we would use this quite a bit to neutralize athleticism, where a team like Villangela St. Joe's, who wanted to get out and pressure us, we could see, here we are against Cleveland Central Catholic running it. Let's see how far you want to extend that pressure with the basket open like that. But this strikes me a lot about, your kind of X and O philosophy, where there's some simplicity with detail. It's not a lot of intricate philosophy. It's not a big, complicated system. It's about, reading defenders rather than memorizing plays, where we're just making simple reads where we can see, if you're denied, you go back door, you fill up. If your defender's even with you, you pop out. If they're in front of you, you cut back door. If they're sagging off, you just catch it where you're at. Right. So talk to me a little bit about how you might progress a system like this into using maybe screen away options or ball screen options.
Well, this is the foundation, obviously. We ran this as an offense, and then you would add the motion offense would have 3 options, which again would have 3 more options. So your 3 options in open post motion were pass and cut, which is what that is. And then there's a pass and you screen away. And then you'd have a pass and screen the ball, which everybody's doing today. Everybody is ball screening. But in this offense, you could pass and screen the ball right now, or you could pass and screen away from you. And if the rule was, if you get screened for, you cut to the basket. Coach McCluskey said, I never set screens for jump shots. We set screens for layups. If they don't defend a layup and they give us a wide open 3 or shot, we'll take that maybe. And he would use a stoplight, red, green, yellow. He'd say motion offense green, which meant any good shot. Motion offense red meant no shots. Maybe you're inside 30 seconds, 40 seconds. He might say, motion red. That meant no shots. You just kept filling out. Yellow meant, any nothing but a layup. So, if you have a 4-point lead with a minute 10 to go, you run your offense. And, you had to, if somebody set a screen for you, you cut to the basket. And the guy that had the ball knew you were going to cut. And you can see how open the middle is. And it really wasn't long possessions. You're seeing here, these possessions aren't long. They appear to be patient, but there's no dribbling. That's the key. In this offense, there's no dribbling. He often would use, and we would use, a ball with no air in it. And you just had to, you had to move and cut.
Yeah, so digging back into kind of a program building philosophy, you use this and I used this to an extent as a foundational piece at your lower levels. Talk to me a little bit about how this is appropriate to use at your sub-varsity levels to teach them a lot of skills that would become more valuable to you once they got into the varsity level of basketball in your program.
Well, we taught this from the 5th grade up. So 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, primarily you ran backdoor, which is pass and cut. Now, when I say pass and cut, look at their footwork there. You square up. Every time you catch the ball, you're supposed to square to the basket. Pivot, like he's pivoting right there, So you're working on footwork. You're working on passing. You're working on catching. You're working on dribbling. If you're going to the hoop, there's a lot of things that can come from that simple movement right there without putting a bunch of plays in or without having to expand it too far. And then once they got into freshman ball, then they started to incorporate screening on the ball, screening away from the ball, and coming off of that, and then running your open post offense.
So you're learning the game, you're connecting with guys like Charlie Huggins, Ed McCluskey, you're studying the motion offense, you're studying pressure defense. Let's talk about how coaches, actually learned basketball back then, because This is long before the internet, before YouTube, before online clinics. Now, if a coach wanted to learn how to run that open post backdoor we just looked at, they could come to the Matt Hackenberg basketball store and they could buy a guide on it, or they could get a Championship Productions video, or they could search YouTube. Before the internet, coaches learned basketball through people. They had to. So talk to me a little bit about how coaches actually learn different schemes, when you were just early in your coaching career.
Well, like we did, going to practices or clinics, which, are still there, but they're not like they used to be. A clinic used to be a huge gathering of coaches who would sit around after the clinic and talk about where to pick up things. I picked up the slice series from a coach at a clinic. We're sitting there Xing and Oing, and he said, "Here, look at this. We run this, and it's got 5 different options." I picked it up and I used it for 25 years in my. So if you get 1 or 2 really good things in a clinic, that was good. But the relationship factor of talking to somebody, or somebody you could pick up the phone and call them, like Coach McCluskey or Coach Huggins. You could call them and say, they're sagging this, or they're doing this. What do we do? Or how do I approach this? And there was always an answer, always a sound, fundamental thing that they would tell you.
So, you're working summer camps, you're networking with coaches, you're sitting around talking basketball with other coaches. Do you think coaches today, miss something by not having this element, not having to physically go seek out information and relationships, where it just comes so easy to them through the internet?
Yeah, I do. When I was at Youngstown, I decided I wanted to get into college coaching. So the only way to do that, I wrote letters to every coach in the country asking if I could come and be a GA or anything. And they all, the ones that I knew, said, you got to work camps, you got to make relationships. So I went and worked all over the country. I worked at Pocono Invitational Camp for an entire summer with some young guys, guys that were just rising that nobody knew, named Rick Pitino, John Calipari, Pat Kennedy, who was a coach at Florida State. Those were all guys that were working the camp with me. And then I got hooked on at 5-star camp in Pittsburgh. Michael Jordan was a senior. Len Bias was a senior. Those guys were at our camp. I met Joe Petroselli from Kettering Alder. I met Marty Chambers from St. Ignatius. Those guys were working there. So you made relationships, and they were 7-day camps. They weren't 3 days, come in, play a couple games and leave. You taught stations and you met people, and that's how I really literally hooked on, meeting Bob and then moving on to college coaching. And I still have a lot of those relationships to this day.
Was coaching knowledge guarded back then, or were these coaches generally willing to share with you?
Yeah, it was all stolen. Everything that we did, not everything. There's 4 or 5 key things that I did over the years that I just invented because I needed something, but most of what we did, just like the backdoor offense, the motion offense that you're selling, that's an offense that's been around forever. It's not new. It wasn't something that we drummed up. It's there. 4 corners was something Dean Smith dusted off and used when he had Phil Ford because he was so good one-on-one. He put Phil Ford out front and let him deal. So, you got to look at your talent, got to look at your program, see what you got to do with it, and then develop it in that manner.
So eventually your path takes you to Walsh, where now you're sitting on the bench with Bob Huggins. You're getting a front row seat to one of the most famous college basketball coaches of all time. What do you remember most about coaching alongside Coach Huggins at Walsh? I know you talked about some of the promotional things that you did, like painting the barn. But what do you remember most about coaching alongside Hugs?
Well, Dan Peters is there too. Dan, myself, and Bob were all about 25 years old. And, Bob was so basketball centered. His whole life was basketball, and that's what I kind of wanted my life to be. That's why it's important when you meet your wife that's a part that they understand. That's your DNA. Bob is that way. He would call me at 2 a.m. sometimes. But he was detailed. The practices were just like Bobby Knight's, from 3 o'clock to 3:07. We did truck and trailer. 3:07 to 3:15. We did 3-man figure eights, 3:15 to 3:20, jump stop pivots, and so forth. And practice ran exactly like that. So he was unique because he had college coaching influence from Eldon Miller, where he was a GA. He had played at West Virginia, obviously, and then he played for his legendary father, who was outstanding, and he was also very close to Ed McCluskey. So, man, you talk about a good mixture of basketball knowledge. Bob had it. So my goal was just to hang out with him for 3 years, as I did, and just learn everything we could, contribute where I did. He was very good at giving us responsibilities in practice, and he worked us. We worked hard, and we're very, very close to this day.
As Coach Huggins' career started to take off, going to Cincinnati, going to WVU, did you ever have conversations or opportunities about reconnecting with him and coaching with him at the college level? You were doing your own thing at the high school level. Was that ever on the table or something you guys talked about?
Well, when we were at Walsh, he was trying to get a head coaching job, and he couldn't get one. And that's when he left and went to Central Florida with his good friend from Ohio State, Chuck Mayshock. Chuck was named the head coach at Central Florida. We were at Walsh, and we were 34-1, and he was having trouble getting a job. And he came in and said, hey, I'm going to Central Florida. Dan was from Canton. He was a Catholic. He had been a head coach in high school. So he was a real good, logical choice for Walsh, and he did an excellent job. Bob told me, he says, why don't you just go and get a high school job for a year or two or whatever, and just see where it goes. It certainly wouldn't hurt you. You got a master's degree. You've been in college. If you get to be a head coach, run your own program, that will be something that will help you down the road, and we'll see what happens. So, that's how I went to Triway, with the idea I was going to go for a year or two, and I had a ball. We went to state the 5th year I was there. We went to state the 8th year I was there. The community was rabid. They hired my wife as a guidance counselor. When Bob was at Akron, and then he went to Cincinnati, and then from Cincinnati he went to Kansas State, and then at West Virginia. But once you get entrenched in the state teacher's retirement, which is a really good thing, and I was just having so much success and fun doing what I was doing. I never really did decide. It's a real taxing thing on your family to go into college coaching. That's one thing I did learn when I was at Walsh. You're on the road, and you're not home. And even though your wife understands, I'm not sure that is totally a fair thing. And we had a handicapped daughter, and I didn't want to just leave, be gone chasing, my dream when I was having so much fun. So I just never left, never got back into college coaching. And I'm sure this is where I was meant to be.
Yeah, one of the things I always found interesting from Coach Huggins and your time at Walsh was this 1-1-3 zone. So I know Coach Huggins was using it while you were there. Years later, I ended up learning the defense directly from Dan Peters. He would invite me over to his house. We would talk basketball. He taught me this zone. I ended up running it some with my Aquinas teams. Do you have much memory of this 1-1-3 zone that Huggins was using at Walsh?
Oh yeah, that was Ed McCluskey. That was called the zone slides. And when people say you can't play a zone today, well, you can't play an intramural zone today. A 2-3 stand around zone, but you can play a matchup 1-1-3, where this type of a zone defense is very intricate. I mean, you got to their zone slides have to be taught and they have to be practiced. You have to have the right recruiting philosophy to get the right people. But boy, if you do, you can be very successful with it. And McCluskey won a lot of games with the matchup zone. And it was a 1-1-3 where, you know, the 5-man rotates out, you know, to the corner. The 4-man takes anything, you know, foul line extended area and below. And then he rotates, the 4 and the 3 rotate back to the middle. So your 3, 4, and 5 men are constantly rotating and moving. There's a lot of things you can do with 1 and 2 out of that. When the ball goes to the corner, 2 can slide right out, and now you've got an automatic trap already set up. And lots of times you get steals out of that. And if you switch defenses in a game or out of a timeout, do different things at different times, you can't scout that. I mean, your kids aren't going to be ready for all that. And that was Ed McCluskey. He was light years ahead of everybody else. And we used a lot of that stuff. We were 34-0 at Walsh, you know, at Walsh College, which was not a basketball power, but our guys were, you know, they were well skilled and they were talented.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches out there don't really understand this zone. It's got some unique slides, some of which you've already mentioned. But I think one of the real interesting features of the defense is to be able to pin the ball on a side. So we see in this first slide on the the left-hand diagram, when the ball goes to a wing, typically in a 2-3, one of your guards is going to chase that and bump off the forward. But in this 1-1-3, the forward's going to take it and stick on it. And then you can deny a reversal pass. So a lot of times against zone, coaches and teams think that they can just kind of swing the ball around as much as they want. And all of a sudden, if you're in this 1-1-3, now you're denying that reversal pass back. And when the ball goes to the corner, we can execute this kind of quick switch where 5's going to go out to cover the corner, which is unique to this zone. We're going to make a drop slide to front the low post, which when I ran this defense, there was many, many times where teams would just throw the ball right to our player, making that quick switch to the low post because they're expecting it to be open and you're rotating a player there. But also when the ball goes to the corner, you rotate your guard out to deny that return pass back to the wing. So again, you're pinning the ball on the wing, then you're pinning the ball into the corner. This can create a lot of chaos for coaches that don't really understand how these slides work. And you can rotate your back line 3 players and have them be interchangeable, or you could do something which coaches would call a long slide, where when the ball gets skipped out of the corner, your 5 is going to kind of make a long slide to overtake who would be X4 in this diagram to get back to the middle. So you could do it that way if you wanted to keep your 5 near the basket when the ball gets skipped out of the corner here. But my single favorite thing about this defense, and I know that this is a Coach Huggins thing, because Coach Huggins really liked to use breakdown segments where he would split his guards and posts, and they would work on things only related to the guards would work on guard things and the posts would work on post things. You can teach this defense in the whole in a split segment of breakdown drills where the guards work on the guard slides and the posts work on the post slides, and then you bring them all together and they have a whole defense. Do you think that that's a feature that high school coaches out there would be attracted to, that you can teach an entire defense through breakdown drills, Coach?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we did. We never scrimmaged. I never scrimmaged 1 minute in 35 years as a head coach in practice. We might go a possession, you know, but we would never scrimmage. And Bob never did either. But yeah, I mean, we did breakdowns with the posts and the guards. The guards will be at one end working on the rotation out to the wing, and the number 1 defender would drop back high post to deny the high post guy, or stop the reversal of the guard. And when you're alternating that, it creates problems. And once again, people say you can't play zone. Yes, you can. If that number 3, X3 there is the guy that McCluskey would steal passes all the time, because when the ball went to the corner and then back out, if it did come back out to number 2, they would try a cross-court pass to 3 because 1 would be covered. And 3 defensively, red 3, knew that if X1 went out and took away the reversal, that the next pass was going to go to black 3.
Yep.
And they picked that pass off all the time. And we did too. I mean, it was really a good defense. It's not practiced much anymore. Doesn't mean it wouldn't work. I know it would work. If Coach McCluskey were alive, he'd be running it. But you gotta coach it. You got to put it into motion, as you're saying, in both breakdown drills and live.
Yeah, there's lots of teams using it at the college level. I know Coach Passner was using this as his base defense when he was at Georgia Tech. There's a big influence on what Baylor does with their zone with this 1-1-3. But it's an amazing defense, and I think it's one that doesn't get as much love as some of the other defenses, and it's unique in how it comes together. So, Coach, you've got your own basketball philosophy forming in motion offense, pressure defense, program building. Eventually that gets tested when you're taking over Triway and you start building what becomes one of the great small school programs in Ohio basketball. And, at Triway, basketball really became bigger than the game itself. I know one of the basketball tactics that you had success with during your time at Triway was this slice series that you've mentioned already in our conversation a little bit, learning that. And that's something that I used in my coaching career, and I kind of wanted to go through that with you a little bit. The slice series is simple, but it's brilliant. And really it's this box set that we're looking at, and we've got 5 different plays inside of one play where we're always going to make kind of the same entry, and then different things are going to happen from there. But we get this same base look. We're out of the box set. We're entering it to a wing, 2 pops to the corner, 5 flashes to the high post, 1 and 4 interchange. And then based on your verbal calls, you can dictate what option that you're looking at. So in this example, what we're going to look at here first is a backdoor for 1. So we would call this, if we were calling slice 1, we would be running this play where we're going to reverse the ball and then look for that backdoor for 1. But talk to me a little bit about the slice series, maybe how you found it, and maybe some of the interesting elements to it. And we'll let the video roll and it'll progress and show some of the different options, a lot of which are easy backdoor calls that you could make.
Well, I got that, at a clinic with a coach from Pennsylvania, and he said, here's a great sets where there's 5 options. You do the same thing so people don't really know what's coming. And the second look or second option is what determines what's going to happen. Right here, you're reversing it. Now he's screening for a 3. That's slice 3. Got hundreds of shots off of that over the years. There's a reversal. Another slice 3.
Yeah, you ran your slice series a little bit different than mine, and the biggest difference would be this slice 4 call that's coming up. You like to run a give and go off the reversal pass. I like to do what we would reverse the ball, and we would follow that for like we were setting a wing ball screen, but we would slip it. So it's a little bit different. We're going to see it right now here on film. But I can't express to you just how many layups we got off this. And just like you said, there's options for kind of each player on your team, where slice 1 is something for your point guard. So if your point guard's getting denied, you could go to a backdoor. If your shooting guard is getting denied, we would run our shooting guard out to the corner, and we had a ready-made backdoor there. But just in the idea of your masking your sets, where everything starts out of a box alignment, everything starts with the same initial movement, where coaches really didn't know exactly where you were going once you called this. Who was your best player at getting a slice 2 on the baseline and maybe cramming that thing home for a dunk?
Ryan Lent. Ryan Lent was the Ohio Player of the Year in '97, and he was 6'4" and high jump 6'10" on the track team. So we'd fill him out. He knew how to draw the guy out and just slice two is amazing how it works, but it works. It worked all the way to West Branch. We were in that my last years at West Branch, and I could still see TJ DeShields just cutting back door and getting a wide open layup. It was always good for 2 baskets a game. I don't know how you felt, but I mean, slice 2, and then you could run this as an offense. We ran this for a whole offense. Some games where we would just run the basic motion and see what's there. If nothing's there, go back and set it up again. Slice 5 was for your postman. We had some good postmen who could reverse seal and get the seal cut to the high post. And that was there. But, Morgan Wenger, who is a teacher at Massillon, at Triway has the record for the most threes in one game. He had 9, and we ran slice 3 probably for 7 of them. I know we did the last one, and he just was good at coming off screens and getting open.
Yeah, and we would progress this where we would make 2 calls, a front side call and a backside call, where we could call like slice 51, where we would enter the ball. We would look for the back door for 5. If that was there, we would throw it. If not, we would reverse the ball and then look for the 1 on the back door on the back side. So we actually could get 2 different play calls in one where we were looking for a cheap bucket. But this is a play that I had tremendous success with throughout my coaching career. I didn't steal it from you directly, but I stole it from your coaching tree. And I want to thank you for that because it provided me a lot of cheap buckets in a lot of big games. So, Coach, eventually all of these, ideas led you to having your own program. You're establishing yourself at Triway. You're getting to put all these ideas into action. And, Triway, your time at Triway is a Hall of Fame coaching resume all in itself. So I wanted to dig into a little bit about your time at Triway. Did you spend 20 years at Triway, 19 years? How many years did you spend at Triway, Coach?
19 before I went to Hoover, yeah.
And when you first arrived there, what did you kind of envision as the program was going to become? I know you'd mentioned you thought it was kind of a sabbatical from your college coaching with Coach Huggins, but you ended up staying for 19 years. Did you see the pieces to be able to, build that community identity, to be able to create the excitement and the expectations? Talk to me a little bit about what you thought you could build there.
Yeah, I first thought, originally I just thought this is a year or 2 job. Get me somewhere where I can get some head coaching experience like Dan Peters had and just, use the head coaching job and have to run your own program. Triway, when I went there, Keith Snoddy was there. He was one of my good friends in college. So we bonded right away. He wanted me to come. The gym, the school colors were purple and white, which was Barberton Magic's. And I thought, wow, okay, something's magical here. They had a pit, which was 6 feet sunken gym. Keith took me in there. We snuck in the day before my interview, and he showed me the pit. There it is. Unbelievable place to play basketball. We lost, I think, 5 games there during the 1990s, and one of them was Oak Hill Academy. So, it just turned into an incredible place to play. And, when we got there, it wasn't anywhere near full, but they did like sports. And as soon as we started to win a little bit and got things going, it turned into a sellout, every night. And, it just manifested over a number of years. The third year, we were 21-3 and had a shot to go to Columbus the third year. So I was like, wow, this is really fun. You're playing the Canton Fieldhouse and it's packed. And, the next year we were making a run to Columbus again. And then the 5th year we broke through and made it. So you go to Columbus and play as you did with your teams, from St. Thomas, you're down there with 13,000 people in front of your peer, all of your peers in Ohio. That's special, and I just loved it. And they treated me great. They treated my wife great, and there was really no reason to leave. And we just had good relationship with kids. I still do to this day. Doran Braun's one of my best friends. We speak once a week at least, and those are the things that you look for in coaching. And then you can still have your relationships with, your coach Huggins and different people that, like Dan Peters, we spent time with Dan talking to him, and those are guys that we've been with forever. And I've been very blessed.
Yeah, so you won multiple AP state championships at Triway. So you're getting the program, statewide recognition. That's a big deal to your program. That's a big deal to the community. We're looking at a picture here of your Triway teams competing in the state Final Four. What do you remember most about those tournament experiences?
Well, they were awesome. Getting there was so long and the game was so short. I'm sure you felt that way. The game felt like it was over in 10 minutes. Both times we played in the state Final Four, our best player, by far our best player, not by far, but Larry Benning had 3 fouls the first 6 minutes, and Ben Swisher had 3 fouls in the first quarter and a half the second time we went. And when you're playing at that level, you can't have your best player sitting on the bench, and that's what we had. And I've always felt like 5 fouls and you're out of the game is a very dumb rule, even though nobody does foul out today, but back then people did. And if we'd have had Swisher and Benning, we might well have won 2 state titles, because when they were in the game, we were really rolling. But tremendous experience. You experienced it, when the whole town takes a caravan to Columbus, and when you come home on a Sunday and there's the gym's packed waiting on you to come back after you maybe lost, as we did. Not much cooler thing than that. The movie Hoosiers was very accurate as to what was happening at Triway, and then what we kind of tried to do at Hoover.
Yeah, the build up to this is just incredible, where you win a district championship, and that's crazy enough. But then, each level that you go further, more people start to come out of the woodwork. And, sooner or later, you might be the only team left in the area that's still in the tournament. So you're getting all the media and all the press. But the Oak Hill game that you mentioned earlier, that's become a little bit of folklore around here, where you brought, a prep school, Oak Hill Academy, down to play in the pit. Talk to me a little bit. What do you remember about bringing a national powerhouse like that into Triway to play a game?
Well, our minister, our family minister at Church of the Savior in Worcester was Jerry Durham, and Jerry was a big sports fan. He played basketball at Malone during his college days, and his head coach at Malone was a guy named Smith, Coach Smith. And Coach Smith had a son at that time who was a little boy, and it was the ball boy, and that was Steve Smith, who was the head coach at Oak Hill Academy. So Jerry Durham, our minister, through the years kept touch with Steve. And, of course, Steve was legendary at Oak Hill, coaching all those years at Oak Hill Academy. And Jerry talked him into coming to Triway High School, which was unbelievable. At the time they came, they were 30-0, I think, and number 1 in the USA Today. All 5 starters were major college players. 3 of them were going to North Carolina. Jermaine Smith was going to Louisville. They were just tremendous. And we sold out the gym in September for a game that was going to be in February. And just pit hoopla, as the sign says there. It was bonkers. And they were tremendous, as good as advertised. And we just one more thing that we could do to promote and do give an experience to our kids, and it was great.
Coach, do you think that smaller communities can create stronger basketball environments because the town can really rally around that identity? Is that something you believe in?
Yeah, I do. Because there's so much going on today, as distractions. Back then, there wasn't the phones and all the internet and everything. Friday night, you went to the ball game. That's where you saw your friends, your girlfriends. You went to the dance after. Today, there's so much else going on that's hard to do. Although out in those communities, it's still pretty rabid and can be if you win. If you don't win, they're not going to come. Triway, when we first went there, they had 150 people at the games. But when you're winning and you got some tradition going and some fun things happening, as you found out there, look at the program you had at St. Thomas. People will rally and they get behind you, but you got to win, and winning's a byproduct of all this other stuff.
Yeah, Coach, your Triway teams could play a beautiful brand of basketball with movement and precision, like we saw with the Slice series, but you could also play with a level of physicality and toughness that I think people might not understand. And one of those concepts would be something that I called tight. So I wanted to pop some film on of tight and talk through this concept where we're using a double post. This is kind of a more old school offense, what it would be considered nowadays. But what we're really doing is, working the ball, trying to use a screen across and a rollback option to create a high-low. And this is, Alliance High School running this tight, but this is an action that you use at Triway quite a bit. Talk to me a little bit about this concept of tight.
Well, again, this is Ed McCluskey and Bob Huggins and Charlie Huggins. This is what we ran at Walsh. Extremely effective. It certainly could work today. I don't know why there's not post games today. You roll, you screen across, you get a guy with the ball on the block. The screener rolls back high elbow. So you got a high-low, and your two guards interchange so that they can't just sag like that guy just sagged. Somebody's open, and there's your opening right there. We did that when we wanted to get the ball inside. The open post, there was no post, and open post would be great to run today the way they like to play the game today, with ball screens and such. But this is a get the ball inside. We want the certain people to score. If you had good post people, got to get them the ball. Wouldn't it be great to have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen running tight? Why you say that wouldn't work, I don't know. You have to teach it, and you gotta run it.
You see in today's game, the emphasis is fast pace, 5 out, a lot of ball screen. And I think particularly at the high school level, you could still use something like this very effectively where you're playing a power game. You're making an emphasis on getting the ball in the block where you can get fouled, where you can get some higher percentage shots. And some of this is just not even being taught anymore on how to seal your man around the block, how to create a shot around the basket. Coaches are using their post players less and less as scoring threats and more as rim runners or offensive rebounders, garbage men type. But I think at the high school game, there's tremendous opportunity to still pound the ball inside. And this might be a concept that I think coaches could get some leverage with. Do you think physical basketball has become harder to sustain in today's game? Or do you think coaches are just going away from it, chasing more modern ideas?
Yeah, I think big guys want to shoot. Evan Mobley's getting excited now because he can make some threes. Well, a 7'3" guy shooting threes, or do you want him in dunking it? That would be what Coach McCluskey would say to you. I don't want you out there shooting threes that are 1 out of 3 makes. I want you down on the block where it's 3 out of 3.
Yeah.
And it can be done. There's no question we ran this tight drill again in breakdowns. We would put the 2 guys on the block, and we'd put 3 defenders in there, and that would be the breakdown. Those 2 guys would have to pick, screen, get open, bang, hit, curl, reverse seal, do all these things against 3 people in breakdowns every day. Like right there, that guy didn't pivot, but if he faces the basket and looks, he can find guard opposite for a shot. He can find the post man making a diagonal cut to the basket. But it's not the style today. I get it. That's fine. But it could certainly be taught. I'm not sure it's something that the NBA wants their players doing. The NBA is a player-driven league, and they want it to be for entertainment, and they want to make money off of it. And this isn't the kind of stuff that makes money. It wins games, I think. So I'm probably wrong again.
Well, you weren't wrong very many times in your coaching career, so I'm going to take your credibility and vouch for this. But eventually you leave Triway after building one of the great small school programs in Ohio basketball. And, now it becomes a completely different challenge for you. You're trying to take some of those same ideas into the Federal League, which is largely regarded as one of the best high school basketball leagues in the state of Ohio. Did you think you could run the Triway blueprint at scale in the Federal League?
Well, I was intrigued by that, and it was just a bigger school. The Federal League was as big as it gets in Ohio, and beautiful facilities, nice place to play and to teach and so forth. So, I thought we could, especially with Kent McKinley, a storied program coming into the Federal League. And then the stuff that we did, with the slice series, backdoor cuts, those kinds of things, I knew would be effective against the kind of athleticism that they like to put pressure on with defensive. As you saw, your backdoor and stuff, I'm sure when you went against St. Joe's and the teams up in Cleveland, I'm sure it was effective. Not easy, but effective. And I wanted to, run that stuff, and it did. It changed. I think we changed the Federal League. It was kind of a slow-moving league when I went there. Larry Taylor had a lot of success running the UCLA high post, and Tom McBride, came to Lake, and there were a lot of methodical play, and we came right out of the gates pressing because we had athletes, and I wanted to establish a running game along with some discipline. And that's what we did, tried to press, go man to man, but we couldn't press our way to a state championship. I knew that. We didn't have that good of athletes. We have very good athletes, but to win a Division I state championship in Ohio, you got to have a couple of Division I players. I knew we would have to utilize some of our ball handling and our execution to be able to win.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that you wanted to go to the Federal League because McKinley was going in. McKinley's a storied program in Ohio. I think a lot of coaches would think the opposite. They would think if McKinley's going in there, there's no chance that we have to, run the league or take over the league. What was different about building a program at Hoover than Triway? You've got the Federal League environment. Obviously, it's a bigger school. You've got different expectations and different community dynamics. What was different about building a program between the two schools?
Well, I think it was similar in that Donnie Hertler told me, he said they're the same kind of kids, it's almost the same level of kids. You just got more of them. And we had more to choose from at Hoover than we did at Triway, and I think the size of the community, the economic abilities, we were able to go to San Diego and play over Christmas, and we were able to go to Arizona and play over Christmas, and Florida and different places. Those were things that were really hard to do at Triway, to fly your teams to those places, whereas at Hoover we could do that. And because of the financial backing that you had and the ability to raise money, size of the gym and so forth. So that was different. We approached it a little bit differently that way. But players were the same. They bought into what we did, and we did 95% of the stuff we did at Triway, we did at Hoover. And it was successful at both places. And I knew it would be because it had been successful at Farrell High School, and it was successful at Indian Valley South High School, and it was successful at Walsh College, and it was successful at Akron U and Cincinnati and everywhere else.
Coach, talk to me about your biggest win during your time at Hoover. What game comes to mind?
Oh, boy, at Hoover, the district championship game in 2009 was a big win because it put us into the regional for the first time in many, many years that Hoover had been in. And we beat Canton Timken, who was very, very good. We had beaten Jackson, the semifinal, who won the state the next year. They were very good. And it was a tough, tough district. Matter of fact, the district was much more difficult than the regional was going to be. So that win, we won by 1 point, I think, maybe 2. But played very well in front of a huge crowd at the Civic Center, and won the district championship that really propelled Hoover into a new level. As when you won the district championship and got into the regional, and then you get to the state. We were close to the state. I think we were very close to getting there again, and that's a process. It takes time to do. It's something you're going to go in and do the first year, probably. It's just hard to do.
Coach, the wind tunnel became some kind of a visual representation of your standards at Hoover. Talk to me a little bit about the wind tunnel and what that represented to your tradition at Hoover.
Well, that's the wind tunnel there. Our first game at Hoover, there were about 100 people there. I remember my wife saying after the game, do you think we made the right choice? But that's what came. That was our second year at Hoover. And, we started to win. Hoover had a good sports town, but they wanted to support a winner. And Canton McKinley, that's McKinley with Raymar Morgan and that crew. And that was 2 undefeated teams playing. And that was the norm during that era, to see those kinds of crowds with floor seats and different things to promote basketball in Stark County, which was really special. And I'm sorry, I forgot what you'd asked me.
Just the wind tunnel in general. What was that?
Yeah.
How did you build it?
Yeah. Coach Huggins told me to name your gyms. He named the Akron U gym the Jar. He went to Cincinnati, he named it the Shoe. He said that's just a good thing to do because the community associates with it. Well, when I went to Hoover, the wind tunnel sweeper came out. And I thought, drop the D and just call it the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
It's associated with Hoover sweepers, Hoover Vikings. And so we did. And it caught on. People called it the wind tunnel. And even the media that came in would call it the wind tunnel. And we won games. We kept a big wishing well in our locker room that I got from another coach that did it. And after every game, we would go into the wishing well and pull off a number and put it up there. And we were something like 112 and 10, I think, at home. It was an amazing number. And then that was the wind tunnel. And the kids knew coming in, we want to protect our home court. And we didn't lose too many games there.
Yeah, so you have this wishing well in your locker room, and it becomes, important to your team to win your home games because they want to participate in this activity of adding another win. You had a 20-0 season at Hoover, achieved great success, and I think a lot of people associate your teams with toughness and with fundamentals. And I think that mentality is built through your daily habits. And one of those drills that you would use to install fundamentals and toughness would be something that I used in my coaching career, which is called 5-pass deny. This might be my favorite drill of all time for the things that it teaches. And I think a lot of coaches might think a drill named 5-pass deny was a defense drill, and you might have used it as such, but I used it to work on our 5-out backdoor offense, which we already looked at, and to really refine the fundamentals of our program, where we have a drill here where you're only allowed to dribble the ball one time every time you catch it. And you have to complete 5 passes or score a basket to get a point. And you would score 3 points to win the drill. So the defense is incentivized to be physical, try to get the ball, not allow the offense to even complete 5 passes. And the offense, you could burn them with a backdoor layup or stretching out a dribble to get a layup. But it really emphasized fundamentals, because you had to take care of the ball to even complete 5 passes, where you're catching the ball with 2 hands, you're catching it on 2 feet, you're learning to pivot through pressure, you're learning to pass under pressure, you're learning to come to meet passes. Talk to me a little bit about this 5-pass deny drill.
Well, yeah, it is. It's twofold, offensively and defensively. You're right. That's a good idea, and we did that some. What I would do is have 3 teams. I'd take 15 guys and make a white team, a red team, and a skin team. And one team would start off on defense, and the only way that you got off defense was to produce a 5-pass deny turnover. And then you got to go to offense. So once you went to offense, the new team would come on, and they would have to play defense on you, and the losing team there that lost defensively would go out, and they might have to run a short sprint, a half court back, full court back, and then they had to come back and get back on the floor. So people said to me, and they often, that you can't deny everybody. And, stupid me, I said, well, yes, you can. And I wanted to try to convince our guys that we could. And thus this drill became a part of it. And then the pride kicked in, where guys wanted to show that we could do it. And then the team building came in, where a guy would get on, you would get on me because my guy caught the ball. And you say, come on, Randy, stop him. I got my guy, stop your guy. And pretty soon it was pure pressure, and all 5 guys were just on you like glue. And then offensively, you're right. Look, how much pressure, like right there, that guy would get yelled at defensively because how'd you miss that ball? Went right past your ear, whereas it was actually a good offensive play, a good cut. But so I like to make drills in different situations that were competitive.
Yeah, this would be one of my staple drills. And I liked that we had staple drills that were hard, that the players kind of loved and hated at the same time, but they were getting used to doing hard things. We would officiate this very strictly. We would even make up calls from time to time just to challenge a player's mentality. How are you going to react if we call a travel when you didn't travel? Even if the ball just got knocked out of your hands, we would call that a turnover, even if you were able to collect it back. So we really wanted to build not only physical toughness and fundamentals, but also mental toughness along the way. Another thing that I really like about this 5-pass deny drill is we would have players choose their teams, where we might do 3 teams like you'd mentioned, but we had team captains, and you could start to see the peer evaluation of the other players, where a guy might be a starter on our team, but he's not getting picked as a starter in this drill because players want to win, and they don't think that player is tough enough or has good enough ball handling. Do you think modern players sometimes underestimate the value of working hard and fundamentals drills?
Absolutely. We don't realize what we can do. We're capable, and that's one thing Coach Huggins said all the time. You're capable of much more than you have any idea that you think you are. These guys today, I sound like that old guy, but, they act like they can't play 2 games in a row. Bob Feller walked off the mound and joined the Army to defend our country. You know, he went over and gave 3 years of his best athletic career to the country, and then came back and resumed. So did Ted Williams. You know, Ted Williams missed his 3 best years of hitting and still was the greatest hitter probably ever lived. So you have to push yourself, and if you don't, you can't do it on your own. And I think too much of it today is buddy. Well, we got to play harder. You can do better. When in reality, you need somebody that's going to make you do it, not because they're mean, but because they're trying to push you to that limit. And that's the thing. And once you do that, I think those coaches are liked later on in life. You know, Bobby Knight's players swore by him. He was the ultimate of making you, go beyond what you thought you could.
Yeah, I would highly recommend this drill as a way to teach toughness, as a way to teach fundamentals. You know, as a coach, once you develop your system for how you want your fundamentals to be executed, a drill like this becomes a stress test for it, because a team isn't going to be able to guard you this physically in a game, because the referees will actually call fouls. And most teams in a game, they're not going to be denying you at all 5 spots. So I think this is a great kind of stress test for any fundamentals that you want to emphasize in your program. Once you teach them, once you set the expectation for how we're going to handle the ball, you put them into a drill like this and see how they survive under pressure. Coach, just to wrap up this 5-pass deny, do you think drills like this shape the overall personality of a basketball team?
Absolutely. No, you shouldn't be the same team in November that you are in January or February. And this will change you. If you do this drill every day or every other day or twice a week for 10 weeks, it's going to change your team. It's going to change their mentality. It's going to change their chemistry. That's really what, coaching is, to make them tougher.
Yeah, I wanted to pivot back and kind of put the closing loop on your time at Hoover. Did you feel satisfied to see that your program building ideas could succeed in another community, that Triway wasn't kind of a one-hit wonder, but you transferred a lot of those ideas into another community and they found a lot of the same kind of successes?
Yeah. I mean, from a basketball standpoint, that challenge was definitely there. That wasn't the only reason that we left. We just, it's a family thing. The education was outstanding for my children at Hoover. Not that it wasn't a Triway, but it was, Hoover was well known for their academics. They also had a good girls program, which my daughter was coming up playing. It was back home here near my wife's family and my family. So, I had coached at Walsh right down the road. So there were other reasons to come here than to, just because of the basketball. I thought that we would get basketball going. I didn't think we'd do it as quickly as we did, but they were hungry and I had good players, Jimmy Savage and Kurt Lukens and Tim Vandevart and Mike Bachman were my first 4 seniors there. And those guys bought in quickly. And we won 19-1 the first year regular season. We were 20-0 the second year. So we won 39 of our first 40 regular season games here, which, wasn't really vogue at Hoover. And, we had to advance through the tournament a little slower because they weren't used to getting very far in the tournament. And that's a mindset, as you know. But I was very blessed, thankful. And, it was a fun challenge.
Yeah, you had a lot of schemes that worked really well during your time at Hoover. One is one of the most unique schemes that I've ever seen and heard about. And you called it Cooker. You had an assistant coach named Terry Cook that took care of a lot of your youth basketball programs and helped you on the sidelines for a long time, but you named a defense after him kind of randomly. Tell the audience a little bit about your Cooker defense.
Well, Cooker evolved from having, we always, every day, did 5-on-4 defense, 5 offense versus 4 defense with hugs. And of course, I took that drill all through my career. I did 5-on-4, and it worked. I mean, we were successful. You would run your offense with 5 guys, and 4 guys had to guard it. And I used to watch it. And I said, man, if we can do that with 4 guys, and we have a 5th guy that would be out at midcourt and just kind of, maybe cherry pick, or he would be at the other end. And if you got a rebound, you just fling it down to him. So we tried it. We messed around with it a little bit, and it was very effective. And it became a tempo killing defense against really good offensive teams that were running against you, like Kent McKinley. I remember running Cooker against McKinley. One time they went on like a 14-point run, and we couldn't really stop them. So we went to Cooker, and they slowed down. They started looking behind them. What are they doing? And, it slowed the tempo, and we got a couple steals. And if you get a steal out of that, it's an automatic basket at the other end because your guy's, he's down there cheating. Looks weird. You got to have the right guy that's your Cooker guy. But if you do, it can be very effective.
So what you're talking about here is basically playing defense 4 against 5, and your 5th player had some freedom on some things that they could do. They could cherry pick all the way down to the other end of the court where you're literally just playing 4-on-5. But I can remember watching you use this, and you had your Cooker player stay behind the ball. So the ball could never get comfortable. There was constantly somebody trying to back tap, kind of forcing them to initiate offense. But you gave some freedom to that Cooker player, and it really was a game changer because no coach has a plan for that. Nobody prepares to see a defense like that. I would imagine there's very few coaches that would deploy a strategy like that across the country. And for you to use it and use it with success, I think shows just your willingness, not only with program ideas, but with your basketball concepts to think outside the box and be willing to do things differently. Another thing that I thought you were masterful at was using a 1-3-1 trap as a change of pace defense. And this inspired me to really want to use this defense in my coaching career. But I remember watching your teams play, and it seemed like you had impeccable timing on when to deploy the 1-3-1 half-court trap, because it's not a base defense. It's not something that coaches stay in for whole quarters or long stretches. But when you throw it out at certain times, it can be tremendously effective in swinging a game. What do you think made your decision whether it was a good time to go to your 1-3-1 half-court trap or not?
Well, different times, during a game, you got to get a feel for it. Hey, we need to change something right here, or the guys are getting stagnant, or just like the Cavs the other night, when they're up 20, the other team's making a run. That would have been a time when they got it down to about 10 or 11. I would have gone to a 1-3-1 just to change it for a possession or two to see if they could stop what was happening. And we did that a lot, at Triway. Did it at Hoover. Bob did it a lot at West Virginia. He did it at Cincinnati. The 1-3-1 it can be extremely effective. You don't want to run it the whole game necessarily, although Jim Boeheim did. And you can win with zones and things, but you gotta pick and choose. Now, I had a coach that I went against, Steve Smith at Orville, who was outstanding. And you knew in the fourth quarter you were going to get this 1-3-1 trapping, voracious half-court press. And it worried you because you'd be thinking about that. Even if you're up 15, here comes that press. And I had to devise, or I talked to the coach at the College of Worcester. I spent all afternoon with him one time. How would you break this? And he showed me how to break it, and I used that the rest of my career. And thank goodness it was effective because Orville was phenomenal, won 3 state titles with theirs. And so a lot of stuff comes out of necessity, You mentioned if you had an Anthony Moglen running your cooker, or Anthony Moglen in the right position on that 1-3-1, becomes a lot better 1-3-1 than the one we're going to draw on the paper.
Yeah, you were known for your game management. You probably weren't going to just sit back and watch a 22-point lead evaporate like Kenny Atkinson did the other night, but you would use strategies like cooker to change a game up. You would use strategies like a 1-3-1 half-court trap to test your opponent in certain times just to change things up. And you would also use ball control strategies. So we talked a little bit earlier about backdoor motion, but we would also do some straight four corners. Talk to me a little bit about what makes a team excellent at executing a four-corner strategy.
Well, that's four corners there with that's Jackson, who was my assistant, Tim DeBevick, who was from Barberton. And, again, people say four corners stall. Just look at how long they, quote, stall. I mean, it's going to be within 15 seconds. They're going to get a shot. And you spread them out. You just break and you look, there's a shot. That shot was in 15 seconds easily. That's what we were looking for. We weren't looking for stalling. And if a team couldn't guard you man-to-man, then I think it's the coach's job to be able to put in a 1-2-2 or a 1-3-1 defense to trap and get you out of it. And, the way the thought is today, the way to get out of it, this is late. They're doing the same thing. Just bring them out. It looks like they're stalling. They're not stalling. They're going to get a good look here. Watch. They're coming out of this and, they fall asleep defensively. You get backdoor cuts out of it. There you go. Look, there's a drive to the basket. That was within 15 seconds. Everybody says, well, that's why we have a shot clock. That shot clock would have been no factor in that possession. But you're teaching your kids defense, discipline, which you need it. When you're heading down the fourth quarter and it's, a 4-point game, 3-point game, 2-point game, 1-point game inside of 30 seconds, our kids believe the game was over. And most teams, I think, can feel like, we're gonna blow this. And you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here is the idea that a lot of coaches don't really understand how to control tempo in their favor. And you can slow games down to make it favorable for you, or you can speed things up to make it more favorable to you. But a lot of coaches just go out and they play their game and just let the chips fall where they may. But a true master coach understands how to manipulate the game to get it in best in their favor. And this is a great example of being able to slow the game down, to force a team to extend their defense, and then create offense for yourself through the decisions that you've made the defense make. Where are they going to trap? Are they going to extend? And when they do, you can punish them. Talk a little bit about just the mentality that it takes to run something like this successful. Because, again, I think a lot of coaches out there, they stray away from this concept because they've probably had some bad experiences trying it, where they've tried it and it's gone horribly wrong. But in order to do this successfully, you really have to teach your players discipline and to kind of understand what's appropriate and shot selection and spacing and things of that nature. So talk to me a little bit about the mentality that would make a concept like this successful.
Well, you're right, and you have to practice it. I know you can't just – I've had a number of coaches over the years would call and say, hey, we got Friday night we're playing St. V in the regional final or the district final, and we're gonna run four corners and spread them out. That's the worst thing you can do. This has got to be practiced every day. We win four corners every day for at least 5 to 7, 8 minutes a day. And we'd usually do it against 6 players, maybe 7, but usually 6. So it would be harder. And then on Friday night, it'd only be against 5. And you're spreading the floor out. You're getting them to move. You're wearing out defensively the other team. There's a lot of things you can do out of four corners. You can flash your high post guys up there and scissor off of them. You can flash them high and seal down low. with the other big, when we had Corey Veldheisen and Fosnight, one would flash high and seal low, and there's no help. It's all out with the guards. So
yeah, so we're transitioning here into some set plays out of four corners, which you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great kind of end of quarter strategy where if you combine four corners with your 5-out motion offense that we already looked at, and then pack in some of these play calls out of it, you've really got something dynamic. So oftentimes in my coaching career, we would be looking for the last shot of a quarter. So we might get the ball with 35 seconds left, and we would run some 5-out backdoor to kill a little bit of time. We would get organized right from there into our four corners alignment and then call one of these plays. And we used, flash into a backdoor, which is what we just watched. We used a flash into a ball screen, which is what we're watching now. And then the last set play that we used out of four corners was to flash and then duck in our other post and play high-low. So talk a little bit about how these things work together in terms of your 5-out backdoor, your four corners, your 4 to score, and also any set plays that you would run out of your four corners.
Well, anytime we got inside of a minute, bringing the ball up the court, we wanted the last shot. That was our goal, unless we got a layup. So if it's 50 seconds to go and we just took the ball out of bounds, bringing it up the floor, they knew we were going to go right into four corners mostly or backdoor. Now it would be 4 to score or it would be backdoor to score. If you had a layup, we'd take it, even at the 32-second point. But if it wasn't and they were going to sit back, we would just, we would quote stall, the last 40 seconds of that half, until we get it down to 12 seconds. Once we got to 12 seconds, we'd call a set, which it's easy to get into a set out of four corners. It's easy to there's a million sets you can run out of four corners. There's a million things you can do out of four corners. The ball's already in your best player's hands with the defense spread. So there's a lot of advantages to being, having the ball at the end, plus you're getting the last shot, which was the goal. And, that was our philosophy, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, I think there's a sentiment today where you see some of these videos online where players are just holding the ball underneath their arm at half court, and, a quarter goes by or half a quarter goes by, and people tend to get really fired up about it. And I think there is confusion on what basketball is for, because I've always considered the goal of basketball at the high school level to be to win the games. Obviously, you want to develop people, but this isn't an entertainment sport at the high school level, which I think people confuse the NBA's purpose with the high school basketball coaching purpose. And to be able to manipulate the clock in your favor, I think can be extra tools in your toolkit as a basketball coach to do things to put your team in a position to win. So I think there's a lot of confusion. I think some coaches abuse the stall, but I think manipulating the game in your favor is a wonderful part of coaching. And I'm not against the shot clock. I don't really care if we have a shot clock or not. My basic philosophy is just tell me the rules and I'll play by them. But if there is no shot clock, I want to be able to manipulate the clock in the most favorable way to give my team a chance to win the game. So, Coach, after decades of building these programs at Triway and Hoover, you're winning AP state championships, you're impacting these communities. Eventually, your journey kind of reaches its final chapter at West Branch, and the perspective starts to change from kind of building programs to, I think, reflecting on everything that the game gave to you. What stays with you from coaching your last chapter at West Branch High School?
Well, I just knew that I wasn't going to be a long-term situation. I had already coached 31 years, and I really wasn't, they needed somebody to establish a program, start a program, and so to speak, and to build a program a little bit and put, 3 or 4 good years in and then get it going, which is really, that was fine. And it was back towards Salem where I I was from, and I was not quite ready to completely quit coaching. So I went back and did that for 4 years, and we established some things, put the ball handling group in, and did all these kinds of things, but we had a lot less talent. And we knew it when we went in that it was going to be 3 or 4 years before they had a good group of guys come through. We had some individual players that were pretty good, but we didn't have any kind of depth, which I think is important in basketball. And you said the shot clock affects the game a lot, and the team that has the most talent will win the faster the game goes, the faster they make you play. The NBA plays a 24-second shot clock with 4 seconds, 5 seconds to get up the floor. So it's a player's league. It's not a coach's league anymore. There's no I don't see patterns. There might be some sets, but I see mostly one-on-one ball screens and drive and create with tremendous athletes. And I think the coaching part of it comes when you have to, if somebody's holding the ball on you, and I never saw anybody hold the ball, to be quite honest. In all my years, I'm sure it maybe has happened. I've never seen it. You certainly couldn't do it in the NBA because there's always been a 24-second shot clock. And if somebody's holding the ball on you and you're losing, you got to come get them. And if you're winning, then you can sit back. But I don't know why, anybody would really stall too long if they're losing.
Yeah.
But if you're up by 5 points with 3 minutes to go, and your strategy is to make them come out and guard you because they're big, strong Cleveland St. Joe athletic guys, that's a coaching move. And they should have to make a coaching move to offset that.
Yeah.
Not make you play their brand of basketball. If I had great talent, I had good teams, some good teams that averaged 33 points a game, and we ran. But to win a state title or to beat really better teams, you can't run with them all. You got to be able to control the tempo. And if we're going to make this just be a fast up and down game, it's going to be all about talent, and the coaching is going to become less and less of a factor. And that's my thought. I'm probably wrong again.
Yeah, you had some success at West Branch. You had back-to-back 16-win seasons. I believe you really set the stage for the next coach to come in there and build off of a foundation that you established. But I thought one of the really cool things about your experience at West Branch was getting to coach alongside your daughter. What did that experience mean to you, bringing your daughter Annie onto your coaching staff at West Branch?
Well, actually, she was my assistant at Hoover.
Okay.
My last 3 years. Yeah, she was my last 3 years at Hoover High School. Annie, my daughter, was my varsity assistant. And she, at West Branch, took over the Wizard program because, I wanted to get that going quickly and didn't have a lot of time to try to find the right guy to build that. And she knew what to do. So she took that over, and she was teaching and had a full schedule. But yeah, it was great. She was one of the first female Division I boys coaches in the state. And she knew the game, and she was loyal, which is extremely important to me at that phase. And we had a fun time. It was a special years.
Coach, you've built programs, you won championships, you've impacted communities, you coached for decades. I think younger coaches, as we wrap up here today, could really benefit from hearing some of what the experience has taught you. So I'm interested in maybe just some general advice to younger coaches trying to build a real basketball program these days instead of just coaching a team.
Well, the ultimate thing is to influence people and to make relationships that will last and help them in their lives. That was my goal always, to do that through basketball. I just felt like I had that calling or whatever to do. And I think that's what you should do. Ultimately, that should be your mission statement as an individual, is to influence and help as many people as you can. I just had lunch yesterday with with the head football coach at Ashland University, who played on my very first basketball team at Triway in 1983. So that was 43 years ago. We're still very close friends. You know, he calls me and we talk, and I call him, and that's really what's important. The X's and O's are fun, and all those things you do in war and battle, but you've an NIL and a guy leaves because he gets more money somewhere else. You're not going to have that opportunity to make that kind of impact on them that they share with you. And I'm sure you have that with some of your former players that say, "Hey, coach, remember when we did that at St. Thomas and you did this and that?" But I hope we don't let that get away too much, because it's not good. It's short-term good money-wise and all that for certain people and players and kids, but it's not an NCAA anymore, you know. And I think Ohio high school basketball is dwindling away. 4,000 or 5,000 people in a state tournament. You and I were very, very fortunate to coach in state semifinals where there was 13,000 people there, and that was cool, and it created a lot of lifelong impressions, and hopefully helped influence people in their lives.
Yeah, last piece of advice for the younger coaches out there. Talk about creating longevity in this coaching profession. We see a lot of coaches come and go. The profession eats at them for one reason or another. For coaches just starting out, some advice on how to stay with it for the long term, and whether it's the right idea to even pursue it.
Hard to do, as you know, it's hard to do today. Back in the day when I started, the administrations, they were there for years, and usually they were former coaches, and they had your back. And I think coaches today want to be more of a friend than a coach. You're not their friend, you're their coach. There's a difference. Doesn't mean that you're mean and you're this and that. You are not their friend. You're somebody that is their coach, somebody they should look up to. And I think guys want to be the friend. They want to hang with you and make it fun and so forth. That's not the role of a coach. Yeah, I don't think. That was not my thought of it. And you want to certainly have respect, but I'd rather be their friend. Like I said, 43 years later, they're your friends. And after they graduate, they can be your friend. But when you're coaching them, give them the direction and the leadership that they deserve, or you're shortchanging them. That's what I think. My coaches were that way. John Cabas and Dom Roselli. They always wore a suit and tie. I would have never thought of calling them Dom or John. I still wouldn't to this day. It'd be Coach Roselli or Coach Cabas, because of the respect there. And I hope that we just kind of don't lose that. I think some of the apparel, I sound like that old guy, but you see the attire that I have on there. Every game I ever coached, I had a tie and a coat on. Now, I'm not sure you have to do that, but I don't like seeing guys come out with different apparel that's not professional. We're doing our profession a disservice, I think. So anyway, that's my 2 cents on that.
Coach, I've enjoyed celebrating the legacy of your coaching career. You've impacted so many players and coaches out there. You're a true innovative thinker about how you approached coaching the game and building programs. I'm honored to consider you a friend, and glad to put all this information and your wealth of knowledge out in the public. This is the longest live stream to date. Thanks for bearing with me. There was even more stuff I wanted to get to that I had to cut out due to some time constraints. But we're approaching 3 hours, and I think it's going to put a bow on our time together. So again, thanks so much. And I've really enjoyed telling your story and, talking about the things that happened during your legendary coaching career.
Well, thanks. And thanks to you for putting this information out, because I think it is something that is useful today that we wouldn't have had 40 years ago to go to. So thanks again for having me.
All right, Coach, we'll sign it off there. Let's stay in touch, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks again.
See you, Coach.